Hey everyone, I'm the storyteller, and I'm here to help you relax tonight. I know a lot of you use this video to fall asleep, so before we start, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, tell me in the comments, where are you from, and what time is it there? Now get comfortable, take a deep breath, and just relax. The spirit in my friend's apartment. This happened when I was just 10 years old, living in Dubai during my school vacation. I used to visit my friend's apartment almost every day because we loved playing video games together. One afternoon, after hours of gaming, I excused myself to use the bathroom. As I was washing my hands, something strange began to happen. Objects started falling from the shelves one by one, as if an invisible hand was pushing them. My first thought was that maybe a window was open and the wind was causing this chaos. But when I looked around, I realized there wasn't a single window in that bathroom. When I rushed out and told my friend what happened, his face went pale. He whispered that there was something living in their apartment, something that wasn't human. I laughed at first, thinking he was trying to scare me, but then his parents sat me down and shared their own terrifying experiences. His father told me about the time he was making a burrito in the kitchen when the phone rang. He clearly remembered turning off the stove before answering, but when he returned, the burrito was engulfed in flames. His mother's story was even more frightening. She was cooking dinner one evening when invisible hands wrapped around her throat from behind, choking her until she managed to break free and run screaming from the kitchen. That very night, they heard crashes from the bathroom and found everything scattered across the floor, exactly like what I had experienced. They eventually discovered through paranormal investigators that 2 people had been murdered in that apartment years ago. The landlord confirmed this horrible truth and apologized profusely. They moved out immediately after my visit, and to this day, I can't help but wonder what might have happened if I had stayed there any longer. The voice from my childhood home. My name is Max, and though I now live in the city center, I'll never forget the old house where I grew up. It was built before World War II, standing on a street that had seen better days. From the outside, it looked abandoned and forgotten, but inside it was warm and comfortable, though it held dark secrets within its walls. One night, my mother and I were sitting in the living room when we heard someone stumbling in the kitchen, followed by the sound of plates crashing to the floor. We rushed to investigate, but everything was exactly where it should be, not a single dish out of place. Years later, I began having the same recurring nightmare. In this dream, my mother and I would walk down a path until we stopped suddenly. A deep voice would whisper strange words, and I would feel 3 distinct knocks on my back before waking up terrified. The voice in my dreams would say different things each time, but once it spoke about my mother's death. The dream always ended the same way, with those 3 knocks that felt so real I could still feel them after waking. When I finally told my mother about these dreams, she went completely silent. Then she revealed something that chilled me to the bone. Years ago, while sitting with a friend who made an unkind joke, she had suddenly screamed at him to shut up. But the voice that came out wasn't hers. It was deep and masculine, exactly like the voice in my dreams. In 2017, my mother passed away from cancer in that very house, in the same room where I'd been having those nightmares. After her death, I moved away and never returned. The experiences in that house convinced me that some places hold onto the spirits of those who lived and died within their walls. Terror at the airport. It was a stormy spring night in 2017 when I found myself at San Francisco International Airport, waiting for my flight to Chicago for a job interview. The rain was pounding against the windows as travelers huddled in their seats, lost in their phones and laptops. As I scanned the crowded gate area, my eyes landed on a man sitting alone in the far corner, while everyone else was absorbed in their devices. He sat perfectly still with an unnaturally wide grin stretched across his face, staring directly at me. Something about that smile made my skin crawl. I tried to look away and pretend I hadn't noticed him, but I could feel his eyes boring into me. When they finally called for boarding, I grabbed my carry-on and hurried onto the plane, taking my business class seat by the window. I never saw him board, and I began to relax as the plane took off into the turbulent sky. An hour into the flight, I needed to use the restroom. As I finished up, someone began knocking on the door. I called out that it was occupied, but the knocking became aggressive and relentless. When I finally opened the door, my blood ran cold. It was him, the man from the airport, still wearing that terrifying grin. I pushed past him and practically ran back to my seat, not daring to look back. When we landed in Chicago, I was the first person off that plane. It wasn't until I reached my hotel that I discovered my wallet was missing. After searching everywhere and filing reports, I flew back to San Francisco 3 days later. What I found at my house still haunts me. The door was unlocked, and my home had been ransacked. Everything of value was gone. The security footage revealed the grinning man from the airport, using my keys from my stolen wallet to enter my home. The police found his fingerprints everywhere, but they didn't match anyone in their database. To this day, I wonder who he was and why he chose me. The stalker in the white car. It was a Saturday morning when I invited my friend Sophia over for our usual weekend hangout. We were having a great time until hunger drove us out to grab some snacks from the local shops. As we walked through the park on our way back, I noticed a white car slowing down beside us. The driver, a man who looked to be in his late 30s, rolled down his window with a perverted grin that made my stomach turn. He kept asking us to come closer, saying he just wanted to talk. When we refused and tried to walk away, he followed us with his car, making disgusting gestures and licking his fingers while staring at us. My friend Sophia was trembling beside me as I grabbed her arm, and we ran into the nearest shop to hide. I called our friend Jahim, who kept insisting we should call the police immediately. We thought we had lost him when we left the shop, but as we walked down the path toward home, Sophia suddenly screamed that he was following us again. Our legs were shaking with fear as we ran to a small park where cars couldn't enter. We hid behind walls and watched as he drove around searching for us before finally disappearing. The most terrifying realization came later when Sophia reminded me of something I had told her the week before. Someone had been knocking on my bedroom window at 3 in the morning. I had seen the silhouette of an arm through the gap in my curtains, knocking persistently on the glass. What if it had been the same man? 4 weeks after that incident, I was too scared to leave my room, wondering if he knew where I lived and when he might return. The floating heads. When I was 7 years old, I experienced something that still sends shivers down my spine whenever I think about it. I woke up one morning feeling unusually cold, with a distinct sensation that someone was watching me. When I turned to look at my sister's bed, I let out a blood-curdling scream. Floating in the air above her bed were 2 disembodied heads, an elderly woman with long dark hair and piercing green eyes, and a bald old man with cold blue eyes. I ran crying to my mother, pointing at the door where I now saw a strange man standing. My mother seemed to understand immediately what was happening, though I was too terrified to listen to what she said to make them disappear. 4 years I tried to forget that morning, but when I was 13, it happened again. I woke at 4 in the morning to find my mother standing by my sister's bed, but something was horribly wrong. Her eyes were lifeless and glowing red, filled with an evil that I knew couldn't belong to my real mother. I hid under my blankets, praying desperately for it to go away. When I finally looked again, I watched as the figure faded away into nothing, growing more transparent until it completely vanished. Years later, when I finally asked my mother about the floating heads from my childhood, she turned white as a sheet. The descriptions I gave her matched perfectly with my grandparents who had died before I was born. Were they trying to visit me from beyond, or was something more sinister wearing their faces? The Victorian Family's Revenge. My name is Tade, and this happened when I was 8 years old in elementary school. We were studying the Victorian era in history class, and our teacher had put up a family tree on the classroom wall. When I laughed at having to study some random family's history, my teacher's reaction was extreme. His face turned red, veins bulging from his forehead as he clenched his fists and screamed at me with rage I'd never seen before. That night, I tossed and turned in bed, unable to shake the image of my teacher's furious face. When I finally fell asleep, it didn't last long. I woke up just after midnight to the sound of voices in our garden. When I crept to the window to investigate, what I saw made my heart stop. There in our garden was a Victorian-era family, the parents beating their child with wooden clubs. Their period clothing was perfect in every detail, as if they had stepped out of our history textbook. Suddenly, the mother looked up at me, her eyes glowing bright red as she let out a bone-chilling cackle. She pointed one skeletal finger at the sky, and the entire family faded away like smoke. I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night, and from that day forward, I never disrespected any teacher again, knowing that some knowledge comes with a terrible price. The possessed teddy bear. My name is Shay, and 11 years ago when I was 12, my family moved from Mississippi to Nashville. We stayed with my uncle's family before finding our own apartment. When we finally moved into our new place, I carefully arranged all my teddy bears on the shelf above my bed. Within a week, something strange began happening. One particular teddy bear would go missing from my shelf and turn up under my brother's bed. At first, I accused my brother of playing pranks, but he genuinely had no idea what I was talking about. Frustrated, I locked all my bears in my closet. For 2 days, everything was fine. On the third morning, I woke to find my closet door cracked open and that same teddy bear under my brother's bed again. I knew then that something unnatural was happening in our apartment. I threw all my teddy bears away immediately. We lived in that apartment for another year before moving, and on the day we left, we made a horrifying discovery. Hidden in the fireplace were human bones. Now at 23 years old, I still wonder what would have happened if I had set up a camera to catch whatever was moving that teddy bear, and what connection it had to those bones we found. The basement creature. My name is Sam, and in August of 2001, when I was 15, I accompanied my dad to visit his friend Rick's new home. Rick had purchased an old castle-like house in the forest, the kind of ancient English building that had stood for centuries. While my dad and Rick went to discuss renovations in the garage, I was left with Rick's wife Georgina and their newborn baby. When Georgina asked me to get formula from the kitchen, I noticed a trapdoor in the corner. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. A putrid smell of manure mixed with vomit filled the room. Before I could react, pale hands with impossibly long fingers shot out from the darkness, grabbing both my arms and trying to drag me down. Purple eyes glowed from the depths as I screamed for help. My dad rushed in just as the hands vanished, leaving deep scratches on my arms. We called the police, who searched the property but found nothing. Research revealed that a man had died in a hunting accident on the property in 1770, but those grabbing hands belonged to something far more sinister. Rick still lives there, and over the past 18 years, there have been countless reports of strange occurrences. I just hope whatever lurks in that basement stays down there forever. The Hanging Woman. A few years ago, I was spending the evening at my cousin's apartment when we noticed something odd. There was a building directly across from his living room window, and one apartment had its curtains wide open. Curious, I stood up to take a closer look and immediately wished I hadn't. There was a woman in the window, but something was terribly wrong. Her hair hung down, obscuring her face at first. When my cousin grabbed his binoculars for a better look, he screamed in absolute terror. I took them from him and saw why. The woman was dead, hanging from a small chandelier, blood dripping from her neck onto her yellow dress. My cousin, who had military experience, found the courage to investigate. We alerted the building security and called the police immediately. When we finally got into the apartment with the authorities, we found the room in complete chaos. The woman's body hung exactly as we had seen it through the window. 2 weeks later, the police caught the murderer and gave us a reward for helping solve the case. But the image of that poor woman hanging in her yellow dress still haunts my dreams. The dorm room shadow. This happened during my sophomore year of college, and it still terrifies me to think about it. I had just moved into a 2-bedroom apartment with a roommate, and everything seemed perfect for the first week. I would often wake up to sounds from the kitchen in the middle of the night, assuming my roommate was having a late snack. After 2 weeks, he told me he was dropping out due to health issues and homesickness. That first night alone, I woke to the same kitchen noises. Confused and frightened, I found a knife on the floor that must have fallen from the counter. A few nights later, I heard sounds coming from my closet at 3 in the morning. The room turned ice cold, and every hair on my body stood on end. In the darkness by my closet stood a figure like a Dementor from Harry Potter, which vanished within seconds. The worst night came when I woke up completely paralyzed. I could only move my eyes as I felt a cold presence behind me. My bed began shaking violently, and in the corner of the room, I saw the dark figure again, this time with glowing red eyes. I prayed desperately, thinking of my family and friends, until finally the presence retreated and I could move again. I moved out by the end of the month, and I still wonder if that thing was what made my roommate leave. The fake accident. I'm a nurse who works night shifts, and one freezing night I was driving home on the empty roads. Only a couple of miles from my house, on a deserted residential street, I saw a man lying face down in the road. My medical training kicked in immediately, but as I slowed down, I realized how vulnerable I was. A small woman alone at night with no weapon. I called 911 while driving past the body, stopping at the traffic light at the end of the block. As I explained the situation to the dispatcher, thunderous banging erupted on my driver's side window. The man who had been lying in the street was now pounding on my window, frantically trying to open my locked door. In my rearview mirror, I could see the street was now empty where his body had been. Terrified, I ran the red light while staying on the phone with 911. The dispatcher told me to keep driving and loop back around. When I finally returned with police on the way, I saw the man walking with 2 other men. They weren't alone. This had been a planned ambush. I hid in my car until they passed, then ran into my house. I'll never know what they wanted, but I'm grateful my doors were locked that night. The ghost on the 9th floor. When I was in 9th grade, I often visited my friend who lived on the 15th floor of an old apartment building. One night during exam week, I stayed later than usual, leaving around 9 o'clock. I took the freight elevator because it was faster, despite its rusty walls covered in graffiti and flickering lights. As the elevator descended with several other passengers, it stopped on the 9th floor. When the doors opened, I saw my classmate Villi playing and laughing with some other kids. She looked directly at me and smiled, but something felt off. I didn't respond because we weren't close friends. What struck me as strange was that none of the other passengers seemed to notice the loud laughter and playing children. The next day, when I asked Villi why she was out so late, she looked confused and insisted she had been home all evening. When I described what she was wearing, she said she hadn't worn those clothes. My blood ran cold. A few days later, I learned from my friend that the 9th floor was haunted. A man had died alone in his apartment and wasn't found for 3 days. Now when I visit, I always take the stairs, even though on my way down I once saw a shadow figure on that same 9th floor that vanished before my eyes. The ghost jeepney. I live in a city in the Philippines, and this incident happened when I was returning home late one evening. The streets were unusually quiet when I saw a jeepney approaching and waved it down. As I climbed aboard, I noticed a woman sleeping against the driver's shoulder, presumably his girlfriend. Only 4 of us were in the vehicle: myself, the driver, the sleeping woman, and an old man sitting across from me. The jeepney was eerily silent as we traveled through the empty streets. After a few minutes, the old man suddenly demanded the driver stop and grabbed my arm, pulling me out of the vehicle. I was terrified, thinking he might rob or hurt me, but he whispered urgently for me to trust him. Once we were away from the jeepney, he revealed the horrifying truth. The woman beside the driver was already dead. He had seen her blackened lips and nails, and an ice pick wound in her side soaked with blood. I was in shock, realizing how close I had come to danger. The old man told me to be more careful before disappearing into the night. From that day forward, I always pay close attention to my surroundings when taking public transportation, knowing that sometimes the greatest dangers are the ones we don't immediately see. The forest creature. 2 weeks ago, I woke up to get ready for school like any other morning. Living in a small village meant biking 4 miles through the woods to reach school, but I always rode with a friend for safety. That morning, I wasn't feeling well, but my friend was waiting at our usual meeting spot. As we rode through the forest, joking about the day ahead, I began hearing sticks cracking in the woods beside us. At first, I dismissed it as animals, but the sounds grew louder and more persistent. When I asked my friend if he heard it too, he said no, which made me even more nervous. Then I saw it, a tall figure running alongside us through the trees. When I glimpsed its face, my blood turned to ice. Everything was wrong. The nose sat above the eyes, the mouth gaped impossibly wide, and the eye sockets were completely empty. I fainted instantly, waking up an hour later in the hospital with a broken leg from falling off my bike. That night, as I lay in bed taking painkillers, I heard scratching at my window. There it was again, the creature with its long fingers scratching at the glass, smiling with that horrible wide mouth. I blacked out from fear. When I told my friend everything, he admitted he had seen the same creature in his dreams. Now we take the bus to school, and I always keep my blinds closed and windows locked at night. Night terror at the lake cabin. A few years ago, I won a big case against a drug dealer and decided to celebrate by taking my family to a cabin by the lake. In the middle of our first night there, my wife shook me awake, whispering that someone was banging on our door. I couldn't imagine who would come to our remote cabin at such an hour. My wife tried to hand me a bat, but I foolishly thought I wouldn't need it. When I opened the door, a young boy stood there alone. Before I could ask what he was doing there, he took off running. I chased after him as he ran in circles around the cabin until he tripped and I caught him. When I demanded to know why he was knocking on our door, his answer chilled me to the bone. His uncles had sent him to get me out of the house. At that moment, I heard my wife scream my name in terror. 4 masked men were running straight at us. I reacted on instinct, running back to the cabin with my wife, who had come out with the bat. We made it inside and called the police immediately. When the officers arrived, they found that the men had broken into our car and stolen personal information. We never learned what they wanted or what would have happened if that boy hadn't lured me outside. We never returned to that cabin, knowing we had narrowly escaped something terrible. The house on Willow Street. My name is Sarah Chen, and I'm a real estate photographer who specializes in capturing homes for online listings. I've photographed hundreds of properties over the past 5 years, from cramped studio apartments to sprawling mansions, but nothing could have prepared me for what I encountered at 1428 Willow Street. This happened last October, and I still wake up some nights in a cold sweat, remembering every detail of those 3 days that changed my life forever. It started with a routine call from my agency. Margaret, our office manager, told me about a Victorian-era house that had just come on the market after sitting vacant for nearly 2 decades. The previous owners had abandoned it following what the neighbors called a family tragedy, though nobody seemed to know the exact details. The house needed to be photographed for an urgent listing, as the bank was pushing for a quick sale to recoup their losses from years of unpaid property taxes. The morning I drove out to Willow Street, the weather was unseasonably warm for October. I remember thinking how strange it was that I needed to run my car's air conditioning when just a week earlier I'd been wearing my thick autumn jacket. The neighborhood was one of those forgotten pockets of the city where time seemed to have stopped somewhere in the 1950s. Large oak trees lined the street, their branches creating a canopy so thick that driving beneath them felt like entering a tunnel. When I first saw the house, I actually gasped out loud. It was magnificent in that haunting way that only abandoned Victorian homes can be. 3 stories of faded blue paint and white trim, with a wraparound porch that must have hosted countless summer evenings of lemonade and conversation. The windows were tall and narrow, each one crowned with decorative woodwork that reminded me of eyes with heavy, ornate brows. Despite years of neglect, the structure appeared sound, though the garden had gone wild, with ivy claiming most of the eastern wall and rose bushes that had grown into thorny monsters. I parked my car in the cracked driveway and began unloading my equipment. The key was in a lockbox on the front door, just as Margaret had described. As I worked the rusty combination, I noticed something odd. The house was completely silent, not just quiet, but absent of sound in a way that felt unnatural. No birds chirped in the overgrown garden, no insects buzzed around the wild flowers. Even the traffic from the main road 2 blocks away seemed muted, as if the house existed in its own bubble of silence. The front door opened with a groan that seemed to echo through the empty rooms beyond. The smell hit me immediately, not the musty odor of mold and decay I usually encountered in abandoned homes, but something sweeter and more cloying, like flowers left too long in a vase. I stepped into the foyer and felt my breath catch again. Despite 20 years of abandonment, the interior was remarkably preserved. Dust particles danced in the streams of sunlight filtering through the tall windows, and sheets covered what appeared to be furniture in the front parlor, but there was none of the vandalism or water damage I'd expected. I decided to start with exterior shots while the morning light was still soft and golden. Walking around the property, I took dozens of photos from every angle, trying to capture both the grandeur and the melancholy of the place. It was while I was photographing the back of the house that I first noticed something unusual in my viewfinder. In one of the 3rd-floor windows, there appeared to be a shadow or a dark shape. I lowered my camera and looked up directly, but the window was empty, just reflecting the cloudy sky. I checked the image on my camera's LCD screen, and there it was, a distinct human-shaped shadow in the window. I took another shot of the same window, but this time it appeared empty in the photograph as well. Probably just a trick of the light, I told myself, though I made a mental note to check that room when I went inside. Back in the house, I began my systematic documentation of each room. The first floor consisted of the foyer, front parlor, formal dining room, kitchen, and what must have been a study or library. Each room told a story of sudden abandonment. In the dining room, places were still set at the table, the china covered in a thick layer of dust. The kitchen calendar was frozen on October 1998, with someone's dental appointment circled in faded red ink. As I worked my way through the first floor, I began to feel increasingly uneasy. It wasn't anything I could put my finger on, just a growing sense that I was intruding somewhere I shouldn't be. The feeling intensified when I entered the study. Unlike the other rooms, this one felt different, colder despite the warm day outside, and the sweet smell was stronger here, almost nauseating. The walls were lined with built-in bookshelves, most still filled with leather-bound volumes. A massive desk dominated the center of the room, and behind it hung a family portrait that made me pause. It showed a couple with 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. They were dressed in clothing from the 1990s, and something about their faces seemed off. It took me a moment to realize what it was. None of them were smiling. Family portraits usually showed at least attempted smiles, but these 5 faces stared out at me with expressions of blank solemnity that felt deeply unsettling. I took my photos quickly and moved on to the second floor. The stairs creaked under my weight, each step announcing my presence to the empty house. The second floor held 4 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. The master bedroom was enormous, with a 4-poster bed still made up with a dust-covered floral comforter. Women's clothes hung in the walk-in closet, and men's shoes were lined up neatly on the floor. It was as if the occupants had simply vanished midday, leaving everything exactly as it was. The children's rooms were even more disturbing. Toys lay scattered on the floors, homework was still spread out on desks, and posters of 1990s bands and movies covered the walls. In what must have been the daughter's room, I found a diary on the nightstand. I knew I shouldn't read it, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened it to the last entry, dated October 15th, 1998. Mom's been acting stranger than usual. She keeps talking to someone in the study when no one else is there. Dad pretends not to notice, but I can see he's scared too. Tommy wet his bed again last night. He says the lady in the walls told him something bad is going to happen. I want to leave this house. I hate it here. My hands were shaking as I set the diary back down. The lady in the walls? I tried to tell myself it was just the imagination of a frightened child, but the words stuck with me as I prepared to head up to the 3rd floor. The stairs to the 3rd floor were narrower and steeper than the others. As I climbed, the temperature seemed to drop with each step. By the time I reached the top, I could see my breath misting in the air. The 3rd floor consisted of 2 rooms, a large open space that might have been a playroom or storage area, and a smaller room at the end of the hall. This would be the room where I'd seen the shadow in the window. I started with a large room, which was filled with old furniture covered in sheets, boxes of forgotten belongings, and several mannequins that nearly gave me a heart attack when I first saw them in the dim light. I worked quickly, wanting to finish this floor and get back to the warmer areas of the house. As I was adjusting my tripod for a final shot, I heard it. Footsteps from the room at the end of the hall. They were slow and deliberate, like someone pacing back and forth. My rational mind insisted it must be the old house settling, or perhaps an animal that had gotten in through a broken window. But these were definitely footsteps. I could hear the distinct pattern of heel to toe on wooden floorboards. I stood frozen, listening as the pacing continued for what felt like minutes, but was probably only seconds. Then, abruptly, the footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse than the sound had been. Every instinct told me to pack up my equipment and leave, but I had a job to finish. I forced myself to walk down the hall to the last room. The door was closed, and as I reached for the handle, I noticed my hand was trembling. I turned the knob and pushed the door open. The room was empty except for a single chair positioned in the center, facing the window I'd photographed from outside. The floorboards around the chair were worn in a circular pattern, as if someone had indeed been pacing around it for years. As I raised my camera to photograph the room, the door suddenly slammed shut behind me. I spun around, my heart hammering in my chest. The door had no lock that I could see, but when I tried the handle, it wouldn't budge. I pulled harder, panic rising in my throat, but the door remained firmly closed. That's when I heard it, a whisper so faint I almost thought I'd imagined it. "You shouldn't be here." The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I backed away from the door, my camera clutched in my hands like a shield. The temperature in the room plummeted further, and I watched in horror as frost began forming on the window. My breath came out in rapid puffs of vapor as I struggled to control my fear. "Please," I said aloud, feeling foolish but desperate. "I'm just here to take photos. I'll leave as soon as I'm done." The whispering grew louder, though I still couldn't make out words. It sounded like multiple voices now, all talking at once in an urgent, agitated manner. The chair in the center of the room began to vibrate, then suddenly scraped several inches across the floor toward me. That was enough. I threw my shoulder against the door with all my strength, and this time it flew open so easily I stumbled into the hallway. I didn't stop to gather my equipment properly. I grabbed what I could carry and ran down both flights of stairs, not stopping until I was outside in the warm October sunshine. My hands shook so badly it took 3 tries to get my car key in the ignition. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw something that made my blood run cold. In every window of the house, shadows stood watching my departure. That night, I seriously considered calling Margaret and telling her I couldn't complete the job. But as I reviewed the photos I'd taken on my laptop, my professional pride won out. Despite the terrifying experience, the images were some of the best work I'd ever done. The house photographed beautifully, with a melancholic grandeur that would surely attract buyers. I had only a few more rooms to capture. I could go back first thing in the morning, finish quickly, and never have to see the place again. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that family portrait, those blank faces staring at me. I researched the house online, trying to find out what had happened to the family, but came up with frustratingly little information. The only thing I found was a brief newspaper article from November 1998 mentioning that the Henley family had relocated suddenly and that the house was being foreclosed on. No mention of a tragedy, no explanation for their departure. The next morning, I arrived at the house just after sunrise. In the early light, it looked almost peaceful, morning dew sparkling on the overgrown lawn. I told myself that yesterday's experiences had been the result of an overactive imagination, fueled by the diary entry and the naturally spooky atmosphere of an abandoned house. I would be professional, efficient, and out of there in 2 hours maximum. This time, I started with the basement, accessed through a door in the kitchen. The wooden steps groaned ominously as I descended, and the smell that permeated the house was strongest here, mixed with the dampness of underground spaces. The basement was largely unfinished, with stone walls and a dirt floor in some sections. Old furniture and boxes were stacked against the walls, and there was an ancient-looking furnace that probably hadn't run in decades. As I set up my equipment, I noticed something odd about the eastern wall. While the other walls were rough stone, this one had a section that looked newer, as if it had been repaired or rebuilt. The stones didn't quite match, and the mortar was a different color. I was photographing this wall when I heard what sounded like scratching coming from behind it. Not the skittering of mice or rats, but deliberate, rhythmic scratching, like fingernails on stone. I backed away from the wall, my pulse quickening. The scratching grew louder, more insistent, and I could swear I heard a muffled voice behind it. Every horror movie I'd ever seen flashed through my mind, and I made a quick decision to forget about the basement photos. As I turned to leave, my foot caught on something protruding from the dirt floor. I looked down and felt my stomach lurch. It was a small hand, pale and delicate, reaching up from the earth. I stumbled backward, a scream caught in my throat. But when I looked again, it was just a child's doll, partially buried in the dirt. My nervous laughter echoed off the stone walls as I picked it up. The doll was old, probably from the 1990s, with tangled blonde hair and one eye that wouldn't close properly. I set it on a box and quickly gathered my equipment. As I climbed the stairs, that scratching sound followed me, growing fainter but never completely fading. Back in the kitchen, I leaned against the counter, trying to calm my racing heart. 2 more rooms, I told myself. Just 2 more rooms, and I could leave this place forever. I headed back upstairs to photograph the bathrooms I'd skipped yesterday. The first bathroom was straightforward, dated fixtures and peeling wallpaper, nothing unusual. But as I entered the second bathroom, the one connected to the master bedroom, I stopped short. The bathtub was full of murky water. That was impossible. The house had been without utilities for 20 years. The water should have evaporated long ago. I approached the tub cautiously. The water was dark, almost black, and completely still. As I leaned over to get a closer look, something moved beneath the surface. I jerked back, but not before I saw what looked like hair, long dark hair, floating just beneath the murky water. My camera slipped from my trembling hands, clattering on the tile floor. When I looked back at the tub, the water was gone. The tub was bone dry, with rust stains and peeling enamel, exactly as it should be in an abandoned house. I grabbed my camera, checking frantically to make sure it wasn't damaged, and took my photos as quickly as possible. My hands shook so badly that I had to retake several shots to ensure they weren't blurred. One room left, a small bedroom at the back of the second floor that I'd somehow missed yesterday. As I walked down the hallway, I noticed that the family photos hanging on the walls seemed different. The faces were still unsmiling, but now their eyes seemed to follow me as I passed. In one photo, I could swear the mother's expression had changed from blank to angry. The last bedroom was clearly the youngest child's room. Baseball posters covered the walls, and toys appropriate for a boy of 7 or 8 were scattered about. On the small desk by the window, I found a drawing that made me pause. It showed the house, crudely drawn in crayon, with stick figures representing the family standing in front. But there was a sixth figure, drawn in black crayon, standing apart from the others. This figure was taller, with long hair and no face, just a black scribble where the head should be. More drawings were scattered across the desk, all featuring this same dark figure. In some, it stood behind the family. In others, it was inside the house while the family stood outside. The most disturbing one showed the dark figure holding hands with the children, while the parents were drawn very small in the corner, their mouths open circles as if screaming. As I photographed the room, I began to feel that familiar sensation of being watched. But this time, it was more intense, more oppressive. The air grew thick and hard to breathe, and that sweet smell became overwhelming. I turned toward the door and froze. There, in the hallway, stood a woman. She wore a long dress that might have been white once, but was now stained and yellowed. Her dark hair hung in wet strings around her face, which was pale as porcelain. But it was her eyes that held me paralyzed. They were completely black, no whites at all, just bottomless pools of darkness. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there staring at me with those terrible eyes. I don't know how long we stood there, locked in that horrible moment. It could have been seconds or hours. Finally, my survival instinct kicked in, and I ran. I pushed past her, or through her, I'm not sure which, and felt a cold so intense it burned. I flew down the stairs, through the foyer, and out the front door, not stopping until I was in my car with the doors locked. As I sat there, gasping for breath and trying to process what had just happened, my phone rang. It was Margaret from the office. Her usually cheerful voice sounded strained as she asked if I was at the house. When I confirmed that I was, she told me something that made my experience even more terrifying. She had just discovered that the Henley family hadn't relocated in 1998. They had disappeared. All 5 of them vanished without a trace on October 30th, leaving everything behind. The case was still unsolved. But that wasn't the worst part. Margaret had dug deeper into the property's history and found that the disappearances went back much further. In 1962, a family of 4 had vanished from the house. In 1934, a couple and their infant daughter. and in 1899, shortly after the house was built, the original owner's wife and sister had disappeared, leading him to abandon the property. "Get out of there, Sarah," Margaret said, real fear in her voice. "Don't go back inside. We'll tell the bank we can't represent the property." I didn't need to be told twice. But as I started my car to leave, I realized with a sinking heart that my camera bag with my backup equipment and, more importantly, my external hard drive containing all my work from the past month was still in the house. I'd dropped it when I ran from the upstairs bedroom. I couldn't afford to lose that drive. It contained photos from dozens of jobs I hadn't backed up yet. I sat in my car for a long time, wrestling with the decision. The rational part of my mind argued that what I'd seen couldn't be real. Stress, suggestion, maybe even some kind of gas leak causing hallucinations. The house was old. There could be all sorts of explanations for what I'd experienced. But the memory of those black eyes, that bone-deep cold when I'd passed through her, in the end, practical necessity won out. I couldn't afford to lose a month's worth of work. I formed a plan. I would prop the front door open, run in, grab my bag from the upstairs hallway, and be out in under a minute. Simple and quick. The house seemed to watch me as I approached the front door again. Every window was dark, but I felt observed, evaluated. I wedged the door open with a large rock from the garden and stepped back into the foyer. The house was silent, but it was a waiting silence, like the held breath before a scream. I made it to the second floor without incident, though every shadow seemed to move in my peripheral vision. My camera bag was exactly where I'd dropped it in the hallway. As I bent to pick it up, I heard footsteps above me on the third floor. Slow, measured steps, moving toward the stairs. I grabbed the bag and turned to run, but the footsteps were already on the stairs, descending toward me. I ran down the hallway toward the back stairs I'd noticed earlier, hoping they would lead to the kitchen. Behind me, the footsteps quickened, no longer trying to hide their pursuit. I could hear breathing now, ragged and wet, growing closer. The back stairs were narrow and dark, and I nearly fell twice in my haste to descend. I burst into the kitchen just as something crashed into the door frame behind me. The kitchen was different. The modern appliances I'd photographed yesterday were gone, replaced by older models from what looked like the 1960s. The calendar on the wall showed June 1962. I didn't have time to process this impossibility because she was there, standing between me and the exit. Not the woman from upstairs. This one was different, wearing a house dress from the 60s, her face partially melted as if from extreme heat. "You can't leave," she said, her voice like grinding glass. "No one leaves. The house needs you. It's hungry." More figures emerged from the shadows. A man in a suit from the 1930s with his throat cut, children in Victorian clothing with hollow eyes, and others, so many others. I realized with dawning horror that these were all the people who had vanished from the house over the years. They moved toward me slowly, arms outstretched, mouths opening and closing soundlessly. I backed against the counter, trapped. That's when I noticed the basement door was open, that scratching sound echoing up from below, louder than ever. It seemed to call to the spirits, because they all turned toward it, their attention momentarily diverted. I didn't waste the opportunity. I ran for the front door, pushing through the crowd of ghosts. Each one I touched sent shock of cold through me, and I could hear their whispers in my mind. Pleas for help, warnings to run, and underneath it all, a darker voice that wasn't human at all. I burst through the front door and didn't stop running until I reached my car. As I drove away, I looked back one last time. The house stood silent and still, but in the third-floor window, I could see a figure watching me leave. It raised one hand as if in farewell, and I knew with terrible certainty that it would be waiting for the next person to enter those doors. I never went back to Willow Street. I told Margaret I'd had a family emergency and couldn't complete the job. She didn't push for details, and I suspect she knew more than she let on. I later learned that she'd removed the listing entirely, and as far as I know, the house remains unsold and empty to this day. But the story doesn't end there. When I got home and downloaded the photos from my camera, I found something that still makes my skin crawl. In every single photo I'd taken, if you looked carefully, you could see them. Faces in windows, shadows in doorways, figures standing just at the edge of the frame. And in the last photo I'd taken, the one of the child's bedroom, that dark figure from the drawings stood clearly in the background. No longer a child's crayon creation, but something terribly real. I deleted all the photos and reformatted my memory cards, but sometimes, late at night, I still see them when I close my eyes. And sometimes, on very quiet nights, I hear that scratching sound, as if something is trying to claw its way out from behind my bedroom wall. The house on Willow Street taught me that some places are meant to be forgotten, that some doors should never be opened, because once you invite the darkness in, even just by acknowledging it exists, it never truly lets you go. I still work as a real estate photographer, but now I research every property carefully before accepting a job. And if I ever feel that particular chill in the air, smell that sweet, cloying scent, or notice that unnatural silence, I pack up immediately and leave. Because I know now that some houses aren't just haunted, they're hungry. And the house on Willow Street is still waiting, patient as a spider in its web, for the next person to walk through its doors and join the collection of souls it has gathered over more than a century. Sometimes, in my darkest moments, I wonder if I truly escaped, or if some part of me is still there, trapped in those rooms, pacing endlessly around a chair in a third-floor room, watching the world through a window that frost never leaves. I've moved twice since that October, but I can't shake the feeling that it's following me. Last week, I was photographing a perfectly normal suburban home when I caught a glimpse of something in my viewfinder. A woman in a stained white dress standing in the hallway. When I lowered my camera, no one was there, but the sweet smell lingered in the air, and I knew my time was running out. Because the house on Willow Street doesn't just take bodies, it takes souls, and once it has a taste of yours, it never stops hunting. I write this as a warning to anyone who might encounter that house or one like it. If you find yourself in a place where the silence is too complete, where the shadows move without light to cast them, where the sweet smell of decay hangs in the air like a promise of things to come, run. Run and don't look back. Because some hungers can never be satisfied, and some darkness, once noticed, follows you home. The scratching in my walls grows louder each night now. I've stopped trying to pretend it's mice or settling wood. I know what it is, who it is. They're coming for me, all those lost souls, to drag me back to Willow Street where I belong. Because I entered their domain, I photographed their prison, and in doing so, I became part of their story. I see her sometimes, standing at the foot of my bed in the early morning hours, that woman with the black eyes and wet hair. She doesn't speak anymore, just watches and waits. The others come too. The melted woman from the kitchen, the children with their hollow eyes, the man with his throat cut. My apartment is crowded with ghosts now, and I know it's only a matter of time before I join them permanently. This will be my last entry. The scratching has stopped, which somehow is worse than the sound itself. The temperature in my apartment has dropped so low I can see my breath, and that sweet smell is overwhelming. They're here, all of them, surrounding me as I write these final words. The woman with black eyes is reaching out her hand, and I think I'm going to take it, because I'm tired of running, tired of being afraid. Maybe it's better to give in, to let the house claim what it's owed. If you're reading this, remember my warning. Stay away from 1428 Willow Street. Board up the doors, burn it down if you have to, but never ever go inside, because the house is patient, and it's hungry, and it never forgets a soul that got away. The darkness is calling me home now, and I can't resist anymore. The house wins in the end. It always does. I can feel myself fading, becoming one of them. Soon I'll be standing in those windows, watching for the next photographer, the next real estate agent, the next curious soul who thinks they're brave enough to enter our domain. And when they come, and they always come, I'll be waiting with the others, ready to welcome them to their new, eternal home. The house on Willow Street is calling. And finally, I'm ready to answer. The new babysitter. My name is Jessica, and I'm 15 years old. This happened last month when my parents went out for their anniversary dinner. They hired a new babysitter for my little sister Emma, who is only 6 years old. The babysitter's name was Mrs. Patterson, and she seemed really nice at first. She was an older woman, maybe in her 60s, with grey hair and a soft voice. My parents left around 7 in the evening and told us they would be back by midnight. Mrs. Patterson brought cookies and said we could watch movies until bedtime. Everything seemed normal for the first hour or so. Emma was happy, eating cookies and laughing at the cartoon we were watching. But then I noticed something strange about Mrs. Patterson. She kept staring at Emma with this weird smile on her face. Not a normal happy smile, but something that made me feel uncomfortable. Around 9 o'clock, Mrs. Patterson said it was time for Emma to take a bath. I told her that Emma usually takes baths in the morning, not at night. But Mrs. Patterson insisted, saying all children should have baths before bed. She took Emma upstairs to the bathroom, and I stayed downstairs watching TV. After about 10 minutes, I heard Emma crying from upstairs. I called out asking if everything was okay, but Mrs. Patterson said Emma was just being difficult. The crying continued for another few minutes, then suddenly stopped. I was getting worried, so I decided to go upstairs and check on them. When I reached the bathroom door, I heard Mrs. Patterson talking to Emma, but the voice didn't sound like the same woman who had been downstairs with us. It was deeper, rougher, and she was saying strange things. I pressed my ear against the door and heard her whispering, "Don't worry, little one, this won't hurt much. Just hold still for me." My heart started beating really fast, and I felt sick to my stomach. I tried to open the door, but it was locked from the inside. I knocked and asked what was happening, but Mrs. Patterson didn't answer. Emma wasn't making any sounds anymore, and that scared me even more. I ran to my parents' bedroom and grabbed their phone from the nightstand. I was about to call 911 when I heard the bathroom door open. Mrs. Patterson came out carrying Emma in a towel. Emma looked really pale and tired, like she was about to fall asleep. Mrs. Patterson saw me with the phone and asked what I was doing. I made up an excuse about checking the time, but she looked suspicious. She put Emma in her bedroom and came back downstairs with me. For the rest of the evening, Mrs. Patterson watched me very carefully. Every time I tried to go check on Emma, she would find a reason to stop me. She said Emma was sleeping and didn't want to be disturbed, but I could hear Emma moving around in her room, like she was restless. Around 11:30, I heard a car in the driveway. My parents were home early, which made me feel so relieved. When they came inside, Mrs. Patterson acted completely normal again. She told them what a good time we had and how well-behaved Emma was. My parents paid her and she left quickly, saying she had to get home. After she was gone, I rushed upstairs to check on Emma. She was lying in bed, but she looked different somehow. Her skin was paler than usual, and she had small red marks on her arms. When I asked her what happened in the bathroom, she just stared at me. She didn't say anything for a long time, then whispered. The nice lady said it was our secret. She said bad things happen to little girls who tell secrets. I felt cold all over when she said that. I wanted to tell my parents right away, but Emma begged me not to. She was so scared and kept saying the lady would come back if we told anyone. The next morning, Emma had a fever and wouldn't eat breakfast. My mom took her to the doctor, but they said she was just coming down with something. I never told my parents what really happened that night, but I made sure they never hired Mrs. Patterson again. I told them she wasn't very good with Emma, and they should find someone else. 2 weeks later, I saw a news report that made my blood run cold. A woman matching Mrs. Patterson's description had been arrested. She had been pretending to be a babysitter and hurting children. The police found medical equipment in her house that she wasn't supposed to have. I wanted to call the police and tell them about Emma, but my little sister still gets scared when I mention that night. I don't know what that woman did to her in the bathroom, and I'm not sure I want to know. All I know is that I will never trust a babysitter again. The thing under my bed. Hi, my name is Tommy, and I'm 11 years old. This story is about something that happened in my bedroom last year. We had just moved into a new house because my dad got a different job. The house was old, built maybe 50 years ago, but my parents said it had character. My bedroom was on the second floor, right at the end of the hallway. It was bigger than my old room, which made me really happy at first. But after we moved in, I started hearing strange noises at night. At first, I thought it was just the house settling, like my mom always said. Old houses make weird sounds, she told me, and there was nothing to worry about. But these sounds were different from normal house noises. They were coming from directly under my bed. It sounded like scratching, like something with long fingernails dragging across wood. The first few nights, I just pulled my blanket over my head and tried to ignore it. But the scratching got louder and more frequent as the weeks went by. Sometimes I would hear what sounded like whispers, but I couldn't make out the words. One night, I got brave enough to look under my bed with a flashlight. I didn't see anything unusual, just dust and some boxes my mom had stored there. But the next morning, I noticed scratch marks on the wooden floor. They looked fresh, like something had been clawing at the boards during the night. I showed my parents, but they said it was probably damage from when we moved furniture. They didn't believe me when I told them about the noises. My dad said I had an overactive imagination and needed to grow up. But I knew what I was hearing, and it was getting worse every night. About a month after we moved in, something happened that changed everything. I woke up in the middle of the night because my bed was shaking. Not like an earthquake, but like something was pushing it from underneath. I was too scared to move, so I just lay there frozen. The shaking stopped after a few minutes, but then I heard breathing. It was slow and deep, like something big was taking heavy breaths, and it was definitely coming from under my bed. I wanted to run to my parents' room, but I was afraid to put my feet on the floor. What if whatever was under there grabbed my ankles? So I stayed in bed until morning, barely sleeping at all. When I got up, I looked under the bed again. This time, I saw something that made me feel sick. There was a hole in the floor that hadn't been there before. It was about the size of a dinner plate, and it was perfectly round. The edges looked like they had been chewed or clawed away. I could see down into the hole, but it was too dark to see how deep it went. I ran downstairs and told my parents about the hole. My dad came up to look, and his face went completely white. He said we needed to call someone to fix it right away. But while we were waiting for the repairman, more holes appeared. By the end of the week, there were 5 holes under my bed. They were all the same size and shape, arranged in a perfect circle. The repairman was confused because he couldn't figure out what had made them. He said it looked like something had been digging from underneath the house. But when he checked the basement, there was no sign of digging or damage. My parents decided to have me sleep in the guest room while they figured it out. That first night in the guest room, I didn't hear any strange noises. I actually got a full night's sleep for the first time in weeks. But the next morning, I found scratch marks on the guest room floor too. Whatever was in the house had followed me to my new room. That night, I heard the scratching again, but this time it was louder. It sounded angry, like whatever was down there was upset that I had moved. Around 3 in the morning, I heard my name being called. The voice was coming from under the guest room bed. It was deep and raspy, not like any human voice I had ever heard. "Tommy," it whispered. "Come down here, Tommy. I want to show you something." I was shaking so hard that my teeth were chattering. I grabbed my pillow and ran to my parents' room. I told them everything, even though I knew they wouldn't believe me. To my surprise, my dad looked really worried. He said we were going to stay in a hotel until we could figure out what was happening. We packed our bags that same night and left the house. We never went back to live there. My dad sold the house to a company that buys old houses and tears them down. He never told me what the company found when they dug up the basement, but sometimes when I'm lying in bed in our new house, I still hear scratching. It's faint, like it's coming from very far away. And sometimes, late at night, I hear my name being whispered. I don't think we got away from it at all. I think it followed us. The school bus driver. My name is Katie, and I'm 14 years old. This happened during my freshman year of high school. I had to take the bus to school every day because my parents worked early shifts. The bus ride was about 20 minutes, and I usually sat in the same seat near the front. Our regular bus driver was Mrs. Chen, and she was really nice. She always said good morning to everyone and made sure we got to school safely. But one Monday morning, there was a different driver. He was a tall, thin man with greasy black hair and pale skin. He didn't introduce himself or smile when we got on the bus. He just stared at us through the rearview mirror with these cold, dark eyes. I sat in my usual seat and tried not to look at him, but I could feel him watching me the whole time. The bus route was different that day too. Instead of taking the main roads, he drove through neighborhoods I didn't recognize. Some of the other kids started asking where we were going. The driver didn't answer. He just kept driving. We were supposed to arrive at school by 8:15, but by 8:30, we still weren't there. Everyone on the bus was getting worried and asking questions. Finally, one of the older kids stood up and demanded to know where we were going. The driver looked at him in the mirror and smiled. It was the creepiest smile I had ever seen. His teeth were yellow and crooked, and his smile was way too wide. "We're taking a little detour," he said in a voice that made my skin crawl. "Don't worry, you'll get to school eventually." But we didn't go to school that day. The driver kept driving for another hour, taking us further and further from town. Some of the kids started crying, and others were trying to use their phones. But none of our phones had signal where we were. Finally, the bus stopped in front of an old, abandoned building. It looked like it used to be a factory or warehouse. The windows were broken, and there were weeds growing all around it. The driver turned off the engine and stood up. "Everyone off the bus," he said. "Time for a field trip." Nobody wanted to get off, but he started walking down the aisle. He grabbed the first kid by the arm and dragged him toward the door. The kid was screaming and trying to get away, but the driver was too strong. That's when I realized we were in serious trouble. This wasn't just a wrong turn or a mistake. This man had taken us on purpose. I was sitting near the front, so I was one of the first ones he tried to grab. When he reached for me, I bit his hand as hard as I could. He yelled and let go, and I ran toward the back of the bus. Some of the other kids followed me, and we huddled together in the back seats. The driver was getting angrier and angrier. He started yelling at us to get off the bus right now, but we refused to move. That's when he pulled out a knife. It was long and sharp, and he waved it at us while he talked. "I'm not going to ask again," he said. "Get off this bus, or I'll make you get off." I was so scared that I could barely breathe. But then I heard sirens in the distance. They were getting closer and closer. The driver heard them too, and his face went completely white. He looked out the windows and saw police cars coming down the dirt road. Without saying another word, he dropped the knife and ran out of the bus. He disappeared into the woods before the police could catch him. It turned out that Mrs. Chen had called the school when she couldn't find her bus. Someone had stolen it from the bus depot early that morning. The police had been looking for us for hours. They used GPS to track the bus and found us just in time. We all had to go to the hospital to make sure we weren't hurt. And then we had to talk to detectives about what happened. They told us that the man had been watching our school for weeks. He had been planning to kidnap a bus full of kids. They never caught him, even though they searched the woods for days. The police said he probably had a car hidden somewhere and got away. After that, I never took the school bus again. My parents drove me to school every day, even though it was inconvenient. They said they would rather be late for work than risk something happening to me. Sometimes I still have nightmares about that day. I dream about being trapped on the bus with nowhere to run. And I always wake up wondering what would have happened if the police hadn't found us. I don't like to think about it, but I know we were lucky to get away. The basement apartment. Hi, I'm Marcus, and I'm 19 years old. This story takes place when I moved out of my parents' house to go to college. I couldn't afford a dorm room, so I found a cheap basement apartment near campus. The landlord was an older man named Mr. Garrett who lived upstairs. He seemed nice enough when I first met him, and the rent was really affordable. The apartment was small, but it had everything I needed. There was a bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a bathroom. The only problem was that it was pretty dark because there weren't many windows. But I figured I could deal with that since I was saving so much money. The first few weeks living there were actually pretty good. I was close to all my classes and I was enjoying my independence. Mr. Garrett mostly left me alone, which was what I wanted. But after about a month, I started noticing some weird things. Sometimes I would come home and find that things had been moved around. Nothing was missing, but my books would be in different places, or my clothes would be folded differently than how I left them. At first, I thought maybe I was just being paranoid. College was stressful, and I wasn't sleeping very well. Maybe I was just forgetting how I had arranged things. But then I found a camera hidden in my bedroom. It was tiny, about the size of a button, and it was stuck to the wall behind my dresser. I only found it because I was moving furniture around to make more space. When I saw it, I felt sick to my stomach. Someone had been watching me in my most private moments. I immediately went upstairs to confront Mr. Garrett about it. But when I knocked on his door, nobody answered. His car was in the driveway, so I knew he was home. I kept knocking and calling his name, but he wouldn't come to the door. Finally, I decided to call the police. But before I could dial, I heard footsteps above me. They were slow and deliberate, like someone was pacing back and forth. Then I heard what sounded like furniture being moved around. I went back to my apartment and tried to focus on my homework. but I couldn't concentrate knowing that there was a camera in my room. I searched everywhere and found 2 more cameras. One was in the bathroom, hidden behind the mirror. The other was in the kitchen, tucked under a cabinet. This man had been watching everything I did. I felt violated and disgusted. I started packing my stuff right away, planning to leave that night. But as I was putting clothes in my suitcase, I heard a key in the door. Mr. Garrett was letting himself into my apartment. I hadn't given him permission to come in, and he didn't knock. He just walked in like he owned the place, which, technically, he did. "Going somewhere?" he asked with a creepy smile. I told him I was moving out because I had found his cameras. Instead of being embarrassed or apologetic, he started laughing. "You're not going anywhere," he said. "You signed a lease." He was right about the lease, but I didn't care. I told him I was leaving and he couldn't stop me. That's when his whole attitude changed. His face got really angry and he stepped closer to me. "You owe me 6 more months of rent," he said. "If you leave, I'll take you to court." I told him to go ahead and sue me, but I wasn't staying in a place where I was being watched. He grabbed my arm and squeezed it really hard. "You're not listening to me," he said. "You're not leaving." I tried to pull away, but his grip was too strong. He was hurting me, and I started to panic. I managed to break free and ran toward the door. But he was faster than I expected. He got between me and the exit, blocking my way out. "Sit down," he ordered. "We need to talk about this." I was trapped in my own apartment with a man who had been spying on me. I didn't know what he was planning to do, but I knew I had to get out of there somehow. I pretended to calm down and asked if I could use the bathroom. He seemed to relax a little and said okay. Once I was in the bathroom, I locked the door and opened the small window. It was barely big enough for me to fit through, but I managed to squeeze out. I dropped into the backyard and ran to my car. I drove straight to the police station and told them everything. They went to the apartment with me to get my stuff. When we got there, Mr. Garrett acted like nothing had happened. He was polite and helpful, like he was a completely different person. But the police found all the cameras I had told them about. They arrested him, and I never had to see him again. I ended up staying in a motel for the rest of the semester. It was expensive, but at least I felt safe. I still get nervous when I'm in small spaces like basements, and I always check for cameras whenever I move somewhere new. You never know who might be watching. The night shift. My name is Angela, and I'm 22 years old. This happened when I was working at a 24-hour gas station. It was my first job after high school, and I really needed the money. The pay wasn't great, but they let me work the night shift, which paid a little extra. Most nights were pretty quiet, with just a few customers. Truck drivers, people getting off late shifts, or someone buying snacks. I usually worked from 11 at night until 7 in the morning. The store was on a lonely stretch of highway outside of town. During the day it was busy, but at night it could be pretty creepy, especially when it was just me there by myself. My manager, Dave, was supposed to check on me a few times during the night, but most of the time he just called instead of actually coming to the store. I had been working there for about 3 months when things started getting weird. There was this one customer who came in almost every night around 2 in the morning. He was a middle-aged man with thinning hair and thick glasses. He always bought the same thing, a large coffee and a pack of cigarettes. At first, he seemed like a normal customer. He was quiet and polite, and he always paid with exact change. But after a few weeks, I started noticing that he would hang around longer than necessary. He would drink his coffee really slowly while staring at me. It made me uncomfortable, but I tried to ignore it. I figured he was probably just lonely and wanted someone to talk to. But then he started asking me personal questions. He wanted to know what time I got off work. He asked if I lived alone and if I had a boyfriend. I gave him vague answers because I didn't want to be rude, but I also didn't want to give him any real information about myself. One night, he came in earlier than usual, around midnight. I was mopping the floor when he walked in. Instead of going to get his usual coffee and cigarettes, he just stood by the door watching me. "You work really hard," he said. "I bet you get tired being here all by yourself." I told him I was fine and asked if he needed anything, but he didn't move from the doorway. "I could keep you company," he said. "I don't sleep much anyway." That's when I started to feel really uncomfortable. I told him that customers weren't allowed to hang around the store. He looked disappointed, but he bought his usual items and left. The next night, he didn't come in at all. I was actually relieved because I had been dreading seeing him. But around 3 in the morning, I saw someone outside the store. It was dark, but I could see a figure standing by the gas pumps. They weren't pumping gas or doing anything, just standing there looking toward the store. I couldn't tell if it was the same man or someone else. I watched for about 10 minutes, but they didn't move. Finally, I got scared and called Dave, but by the time he answered, the person was gone. Dave said he would drive by to check on me, but he never showed up. The rest of the night passed without incident, but the next evening, the man came back. This time, he had a different attitude. He wasn't trying to be friendly anymore. He seemed angry about something. "You called your boss on me last night," he said. I didn't know how he knew that, and I told him I didn't know what he was talking about. "Don't lie to me," he said. "I saw his car drive by. I was getting really scared now. If he had been watching the store, that meant he had been outside for a long time. Maybe he had been watching me other nights too." I told him he needed to leave or I would call the police. He laughed and said the police wouldn't get there in time to help me. That's when I realized he might be planning to hurt me. I reached for the phone, but he moved really quickly. He jumped over the counter and grabbed my wrist. "We need to talk," he said, "and you're going to listen." I tried to pull away, but he was much stronger than me. He started telling me that he had been watching me for weeks. He knew what time I got to work and what time I left. He knew which car was mine and where I went after work. He had been following me home. I was so scared that I started crying. I begged him to let me go, but he just tightened his grip. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. "I just want us to be friends." But the way he was holding me didn't feel friendly at all. I could see his car parked outside, and I wondered if he was planning to take me somewhere. Then I remembered that there was a panic button under the counter. It was connected directly to the police station. I had been trained to use it if there was ever a robbery. While he was talking, I slowly moved my free hand toward the button. When I pressed it, nothing seemed to happen, but I hoped that meant the police were on their way. The man kept talking about how lonely he was and how we could be good together. He said he had been looking for someone like me for a long time. I just nodded and tried to keep him calm until help arrived. After what felt like hours, I heard sirens in the distance. The man heard them too, and his grip on my wrist got tighter. "You called them," he said. "Why did you do that?" I told him I hadn't called anyone, but he didn't believe me. He let go of my wrist and ran toward the back of the store. There was an emergency exit back there, and he disappeared through it. The police arrived about 2 minutes later. I told them everything that had happened, and they searched the area, but they never found him. They did find his car in the parking lot, though. It had been stolen from a town about 50 miles away. The police said he had probably been using it to follow different women. I quit that job the next day. I couldn't handle being alone in that store anymore. Even now, 2 years later, I still check my rearview mirror constantly. I'm always worried that he might be following me again. And I never work night shifts anymore. The sleepover. Hi, my name is Sarah, and I'm 13 years old. This story happened at my best friend Emma's house during a sleepover. Emma and I had been best friends since 2nd grade. We had sleepovers at each other's houses all the time. Her parents were really nice and always made us feel welcome. This particular sleepover was supposed to be extra special. It was Emma's birthday weekend, and she had invited 3 other girls too. There was me, Emma, and our friends Chloe and Madison. We were all really excited to spend the whole night together. Emma's parents had bought us pizza and ice cream for dinner, and they said we could stay up as late as we wanted. We spent the first few hours watching movies and doing each other's hair. Emma's mom checked on us around 10 o'clock to make sure we had everything we needed. She said she and Emma's dad were going to bed, but we could wake them if we needed anything. After her parents went upstairs, we decided to play some games. First we played Truth or Dare, which was fun but not too exciting. Then Chloe suggested we play with a Ouija board. Emma said she had one in her closet that her older sister had left behind. I didn't really want to play with it because my mom had always said those things were dangerous. But I didn't want to seem like a baby in front of my friends, so I agreed to try it just once. Emma got the board from her closet and we set it up on her bedroom floor. We all put our fingers on the pointer and asked if anyone was there. At first, nothing happened and we all started giggling. But then the pointer started moving really slowly. It spelled out the word yes, and we all looked at each other with wide eyes. Chloe asked who we were talking to. The pointer moved again and spelled out Michael. Madison asked how old Michael was. The pointer moved to the number 9 on the board. We were all getting a little scared, but also excited. It felt like we were really talking to a ghost. Emma asked Michael how he died. The pointer started moving faster now. It spelled out murder, and we all gasped. I wanted to stop playing, but the others wanted to keep going. Chloe asked who murdered Michael. The pointer moved to spell out, he is here. That's when we all got really scared. Madison asked where here was. The pointer spelled out, in the house. We all looked around Emma's room nervously. I said we should stop playing and put the board away. But before we could lift our fingers, the pointer started moving again. This time it spelled out, upstairs. Emma's bedroom was on the first floor, so upstairs was where her parents were sleeping. We all whispered about whether we should go check on them, but we were too scared to leave the room. Then we heard a noise from upstairs. It sounded like footsteps walking slowly across the floor. Emma said it was probably just her dad going to the bathroom, but the footsteps kept going for a long time. They walked from one end of the house to the other. Then we heard what sounded like a door opening and closing. All of us were listening really carefully now. The footsteps started again, but this time they were coming toward the stairs. We could hear someone walking down the steps really slowly. Each step creaked as they put their weight on it. Emma whispered that we should hide in her closet. We all scrambled to get up, but then the footsteps stopped. Everything was completely quiet for about a minute. Then we heard Emma's mom scream. It was the loudest, most terrified scream I had ever heard. We all ran out of Emma's room and toward the stairs. Emma called for her mom, but there was no answer. The screaming had stopped, and the house was silent again. Emma started running up the stairs, and we all followed her. When we got to her parents' bedroom, the door was wide open. Emma's mom and dad were both sitting up in bed, looking confused. Emma asked her mom why she had screamed, but her mom said she hadn't screamed at all. She said they had been sleeping, and we had woken them up by running around. We told them about the footsteps and the scream we had heard, but they said they hadn't heard anything. Emma's dad got up and checked all the doors and windows. Everything was locked, just like it had been when we went to bed. There was no sign that anyone had been in the house. Emma's parents said we had probably just scared ourselves with whatever game we were playing. They told us to try to get some sleep and not worry about it. But none of us could sleep after that. We stayed awake until morning, huddled together in Emma's room. We never told her parents about the Ouija board, and we never played with one again. But sometimes, when I'm at Emma's house, I still hear footsteps upstairs, even when no one else is up there. Emma says she hears them too. We think Michael is still in the house, and I don't think he's planning to leave anytime soon. The ice cream truck. My name is Jake, and I'm 10 years old. This happened during summer vacation when I was staying at my grandma's house. My parents had to go out of town for work, so I spent 2 weeks with Grandma. Her neighborhood was really quiet with lots of old people living there. There weren't many kids my age, so I spent most of my time playing video games or reading. But every afternoon around 3 o'clock, I would hear the ice cream truck coming. You know that song they play that sounds like a music box? It always made me excited because Grandma would give me money to buy a popsicle. The ice cream truck driver was a man named Mr. Pete. He was probably in his 50s, with a big belly and a beard. He always wore the same dirty white uniform and a baseball cap. All the kids in the neighborhood knew him because he had been driving the truck for years. At first, he seemed like a normal ice cream truck driver. He was friendly and always had a smile when he handed out the treats. But after a few days, I started noticing some strange things about him. He would park his truck and then just sit there for a long time. Even after all the kids had bought their ice cream and gone home, he would stay. I could see him from Grandma's kitchen window, just sitting in his truck. Sometimes he would get out and walk around the neighborhood. He would stop in front of different houses and just stare at them. It seemed like he was looking for something, but I didn't know what. One day, I was playing in Grandma's front yard when he drove up. Instead of parking on the street like he usually did, he pulled into Grandma's driveway. He got out of the truck and walked over to me. "Hey there, buddy," he said. "Having a good summer?" I told him I was having fun at Grandma's house. He asked if my parents were visiting too. I explained that they were out of town and it was just me and Grandma. His eyes seemed to light up when I said that. "Just you and Grandma, huh?" he said. "That must be nice and quiet." I nodded and asked if I could buy a rocket popsicle. He gave me the popsicle but didn't ask for money. "This one's free," he said, "for being such a good customer." Then he asked if Grandma was home. I told him she was taking a nap because she always rested in the afternoons. "I see," he said. "And what time does she usually wake up?" I thought it was a weird question, but I told him she usually got up around 4:30. He nodded and wrote something down in a little notebook. "Well, I better get going," he said. "I'll see you tomorrow, Jake." I was surprised that he knew my name, since I had never told him, but I figured Grandma must have mentioned it to him before. The next day, he came by again at the same time. This time, he parked on the street but walked up to the front door. He knocked and waited for Grandma to answer. I was watching from the living room window. When Grandma opened the door, Mr. Pete started talking to her. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but Grandma looked uncomfortable. She kept shaking her head and trying to close the door. But Mr. Pete put his foot in the doorway so she couldn't shut it. They talked for a few more minutes. Then he finally left. When Grandma came back inside, she looked really worried. I asked her what Mr. Pete had wanted. She said he was asking questions about our family. He wanted to know when my parents were coming back and if anyone else visited the house. Grandma said she didn't like the way he was acting. She told me not to buy ice cream from him anymore. I asked why, but she just said we needed to be careful around strangers. That night, I woke up around midnight because I heard the ice cream truck song. It was playing really softly, like someone had turned down the volume. I looked out my bedroom window and saw the truck parked across the street. All the lights in the truck were off, but I could see someone sitting in the driver's seat. The music played for about 10 minutes, then stopped. But the truck didn't drive away. It just sat there in the dark. I watched for another hour, but nothing happened. Finally, I fell back asleep. The next morning, I told Grandma about seeing the truck at night. Her face went completely pale when I told her. She said that ice cream trucks don't drive around at midnight. She asked if I was sure about what I had seen. I promised her that I wasn't making it up. Grandma went to the phone and called the police. She told them about Mr. Pete asking strange questions and about the truck being there at night. The police said they would look into it. That afternoon, Mr. Pete came by at his usual time. But this time, a police car was parked on our street. When Mr. Pete saw the police, he didn't get out of his truck. He just drove away really fast without stopping. One of the police officers came to talk to Grandma. He said they had been getting complaints about Mr. Pete from other neighborhoods too. He had been asking personal questions about families and hanging around houses at night. The officer said Mr. Pete wasn't really an ice cream truck driver. He had stolen the truck from a real ice cream company. They had been looking for him for weeks. It turned out that Mr. Pete was planning to rob houses. He used the ice cream truck to figure out which houses would be easy targets. He would ask kids questions to find out when their parents weren't home. Then he would come back at night to break in. The police caught him 2 days later trying to break into a house on the other side of town. They found a notebook in his truck with information about dozens of families. Our address was in there, along with notes about when Grandma took her naps. He had been planning to rob Grandma's house while she was sleeping. The police said we were lucky that Grandma had called when she did. If we had waited any longer, Mr. Pete might have tried to break in. After that, I was always suspicious of ice cream trucks. Even when I was back home with my parents, I wouldn't buy ice cream from trucks I didn't recognize. My parents thought I was being silly, but Grandma understood. She said it's always better to be safe than sorry. Now, whenever I hear that ice cream truck song, I think about Mr. Pete, and I always make sure to check who's driving before I get too close. You never know who might be hiding behind that friendly smile. The hospital room. Hi, my name is David, and I'm 16 years old. This story happened when I had to stay in the hospital for a week. I had broken my leg really badly in a skateboard accident. The doctors said I needed surgery and would have to stay for observation. I wasn't happy about missing school and being stuck in bed, but the hospital seemed nice enough, and the nurses were pretty friendly. My room was on the 3rd floor, and I had a view of the parking lot. At first, I had a roommate named Carlos who was about my age. He had his appendix out and was going home the next day. Carlos was cool, and we talked about video games and sports. Having him there made the time go by faster. But after Carlos left, they didn't give me a new roommate right away. The bed next to mine just sat empty for 2 days. Being alone in the hospital room was kind of creepy, especially at night. The hallways were quiet except for the sound of nurses walking around. Sometimes I would hear patients in other rooms talking or watching TV, but mostly it was just silent. On my 3rd night there, something weird happened. I woke up around 2 in the morning because I heard voices. At first, I thought it was coming from the hallway, but as I listened more carefully, I realized the voices were coming from the empty bed next to me. It sounded like 2 people having a conversation. One voice was deep, like an older man. The other voice was higher, maybe a woman or a child. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but they seemed to be talking back and forth. I looked over at the empty bed, but I couldn't see anyone there. The voices continued for about 10 minutes, then stopped. I figured I must have been dreaming or hearing things from another room. The next day, I asked one of the nurses about it. I told her I had heard voices coming from the empty bed. She looked at me strangely and asked if I was feeling okay. I said I felt fine, but I was sure I had heard people talking. The nurse said that sometimes pain medication can cause hallucinations. She suggested that I try to get more sleep, but I knew I hadn't been dreaming. The voices had been real. That night, I stayed awake on purpose to see if it would happen again. Around the same time, about 2 in the morning, the voices started. This time, I listened more carefully to try to understand what they were saying. The deep voice said something about not being ready to go. The higher voice said, "It's time," and "You can't stay here forever." They seemed to be arguing about something. I was getting scared, but I forced myself to keep listening. Then the deep voice said my name. "David," it said. "David is listening to us." I felt cold all over when I heard that. The higher voice said, "He can hear us, and we should be more careful." Then both voices got quieter, like they were whispering. I couldn't make out the words anymore, but I could still hear them talking. After about 20 minutes, the voices stopped completely. I didn't sleep at all the rest of that night. The next morning, I told the day nurse about what I had heard. This time, I was more specific about the conversation. I told her that the voices knew my name and were talking about me. The nurse looked really concerned when I said that. She asked me to wait while she went to get someone. A few minutes later, she came back with a doctor I hadn't met before. The doctor asked me to repeat everything I had told the nurse. After I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Finally, he asked if anyone had told me about the patient who used to be in that bed. I said no, and asked what he meant. The doctor explained that the bed next to mine had been occupied until a few days ago. There had been an elderly man named Mr. Williams who was very sick. He had been in the hospital for months and didn't have any family. Mr. Williams had died the night before I arrived. The doctor said Mr. Williams had been afraid of dying. He had begged the nurses not to let him go. On his last night, he had been talking to someone, but there was no one else in the room. The nurses thought he was talking to a deceased relative who had come to help him pass on. But Mr. Williams kept saying he wasn't ready and didn't want to leave. When the doctor finished telling me this, I felt sick to my stomach. I realized that I had been hearing Mr. Williams talking to whoever had come for him, but apparently he still wasn't ready to go. He was still in that bed, even though his body was gone. I asked if they could move me to a different room. The doctor said he would see what he could do, but the hospital was full, and there weren't any other rooms available. I had to stay in that room for 3 more nights. Each night, I heard the voices again, Mr. Williams and the other voice, still arguing about whether it was time to leave. Sometimes they would talk about me, wondering if I could really hear them. The other voice kept trying to convince Mr. Williams that he needed to move on, but Mr. Williams was stubborn and refused to go. On my last night in the hospital, something different happened. Instead of just talking to each other, Mr. Williams spoke directly to me. "David," he said in that deep voice, "can you help me? I was so scared that I couldn't move or speak. I don't want to be alone," he continued. "Everyone I knew is gone." The other voice said, "You won't be alone where you're going." But Mr. Williams said, "I don't believe you. I want to stay here where it's safe." I felt sorry for him, even though I was terrified. I whispered that I was sure everything would be okay if he went with the other voice. There was silence for a moment. Then Mr. Williams said, "Thank you, David. You're a good boy." The other voice said, "It's time now. Trust me." I heard what sounded like someone getting up from the bed. Then I heard footsteps walking toward the door. The footsteps stopped, and Mr. Williams said, "Goodbye, David. Take care of yourself." Then both voices were gone. I never heard them again. The next morning, I was discharged from the hospital. As I was leaving, one of the nurses stopped me. She said that several patients had reported hearing voices from that room over the years, but no one had ever been able to help the voices move on before. She thanked me for whatever I had done. I never told anyone else about that conversation, but sometimes I think about Mr. Williams and hope he found peace. I learned that dying can be scary, even for adults, and sometimes all someone needs is a kind word from a stranger. The moving day. My name is Lisa, and I'm 12 years old. This story happened when my family moved to a new house last summer. My dad got a job in a different city, so we had to pack up everything and start over. I was sad about leaving my friends, but I was also excited about the new house. It was bigger than our old house and had a huge backyard. The moving truck came early in the morning, and the movers started loading our stuff. My parents were busy organizing everything, so I didn't have much to do. I decided to explore the new neighborhood while they worked. The houses on our street were all pretty old, but they looked nice. Most of them had big front porches and lots of trees in the yards. Our house was at the end of a dead-end street, so it was really quiet. As I was walking around, I noticed that one house looked different from the others. It was right across the street from us, but it looked abandoned. The grass was overgrown, and there were newspapers piled up on the porch. Some of the windows had boards over them, and the paint was peeling off the walls. I wondered why no one had bought it or fixed it up. When I got back to our house, I asked my mom about the abandoned house. She said she had noticed it too, but she didn't know anything about it. She suggested that we could ask the neighbors once we got settled in. The rest of the day was spent unpacking boxes and arranging furniture. By evening, we were all exhausted and decided to order pizza for dinner. As we were eating, I kept looking out the window at the abandoned house. It looked even creepier in the dark. Most of the streetlights on our block were working, but the one in front of that house was burned out. It made the whole house look like a black hole in the middle of the street. That night, I had trouble falling asleep in my new room. Everything felt strange and unfamiliar. Around midnight, I got up to get a drink of water. My bedroom window faced the street, so I could see the abandoned house clearly. As I was looking out the window, I saw a light moving around inside the house. It looked like someone was walking around with a flashlight. I watched for about 10 minutes, and the light kept moving from room to room. Sometimes it would stop for a while, then start moving again. I thought maybe it was someone checking on the house, like a security guard or something. But it seemed weird that they would be there so late at night. The next morning, I told my parents about the light I had seen. My dad said it was probably just the real estate agent or a repair person. But my mom looked worried and said she would call the police if we saw it again. We spent the next few days getting used to our new house and meeting the neighbors. Everyone was really friendly and welcoming. But when I asked about the abandoned house, people got uncomfortable. One neighbor said the house had been empty for years. Another neighbor said there had been some kind of accident there. But no one wanted to give me details about what had happened. On our 4th night in the new house, I saw the light again. This time, it was earlier in the evening, around 9 o'clock. I called my parents to come look, and they saw it too. My dad decided to go over and see who was there. My mom and I watched from the window as he walked across the street. He knocked on the front door, but no one answered. He walked around the house and checked all the windows, but he didn't see anyone inside. When he came back, he said the house was definitely empty. He had looked through the windows and there was no furniture or anything, but we had all seen the light moving around inside. My mom called the police, and they said they would drive by to check on the house, but they didn't find anything suspicious. The officer said it was probably just car headlights reflecting off the windows, but I knew that wasn't what we had seen. Over the next few weeks, I kept watching the house every night. The light appeared at least 3 or 4 times a week. Sometimes it was just for a few minutes, other times it lasted for hours. I started keeping a notebook to write down when I saw it. I was trying to figure out if there was a pattern. One night, I decided to get a closer look. I waited until my parents were asleep, then snuck out of the house. I crossed the street and walked up to the front porch of the abandoned house. The front door was locked, but I could hear sounds coming from inside. It sounded like someone walking around and moving things. I walked around to the side of the house and found a window that wasn't boarded up. I looked inside and saw something that made my heart stop. There was a person inside, but they looked strange. They were wearing old-fashioned clothes, and their skin looked pale and grey. The person was carrying a lantern, which explained the light I had been seeing. They were walking from room to room, like they were looking for something. As I watched, the person stopped and turned toward the window where I was standing. Even though it was dark outside, they seemed to see me. They stared at me for a long moment, then started walking toward the window. I got scared and ran back to my house as fast as I could. I locked the door and ran upstairs to my room. From my window, I could see the person standing at the window I had been looking through. They held up the lantern and waved at me. I closed my curtains and didn't look outside again that night. The next day, I told my parents what I had seen. They didn't believe me at first, but I begged them to call the police again. This time, the police took it more seriously. They went into the abandoned house and searched every room. They found evidence that someone had been living there. There were blankets and food wrappers, and someone had set up a makeshift bed. But whoever it was had left before the police arrived. The police said it was probably a homeless person who had been using the house for shelter. They boarded up the broken window and put better locks on the doors. But I knew it wasn't a homeless person I had seen. Homeless people don't wear clothes from 100 years ago, and their skin doesn't look grey and transparent. I think the person I saw had died in that house a long time ago, and for some reason they were still there, looking for something they had lost. After the police secured the house, I never saw the light again. But sometimes, late at night, I feel like someone is watching me from across the street. I keep my curtains closed now, and I never go outside alone after dark. Some things are better left alone. The night that changed everything. I was 22 years old when this happened to me. Even now, 3 years later, I still wake up in cold sweats thinking about it. It was supposed to be just another Friday night with my roommate Jake. We lived in a small apartment near the university campus. The place wasn't much, but it was home. That evening started like any other. Jake was playing video games in the living room. I was in my bedroom, scrolling through my phone. Around 9 p.m., Jake knocked on my door. "Hey man, I'm ordering pizza. You want some?" I told him I'd already eaten, but thanks anyway. He shrugged and went back to his games. About an hour later, I heard the doorbell ring. Jake's voice carried through the thin walls as he paid for the pizza. Then I heard another voice. It was deeper, rougher somehow. The delivery guy was talking for way too long. I could hear Jake trying to end the conversation politely. "Thanks man, have a good night," Jake said. But the other voice kept going. Something about it made my skin crawl. I got up from my bed and walked quietly to my door. Through the crack under my door, I could see shadows moving in the hallway. The delivery guy had come inside. That wasn't normal. Jake's voice sounded nervous now. "Hey, I really need to get back to my game." The stranger laughed. It wasn't a friendly laugh. "What's the rush? I just want to see your place." My heart started pounding. I grabbed my phone and typed 911, but didn't hit call yet. Maybe I was overreacting. The footsteps moved toward the living room. I heard Jake following, still trying to get the guy to leave. "Look man, my roommate's sleeping. You really need to go." Another laugh from the stranger. "Roommate, huh? Where is he?" I held my breath. Through my door, I heard Jake lie. "He's at work. Night shift." There was a long pause. "Too long." "That's funny," the stranger said slowly, "because I saw someone in that back bedroom window when I pulled up. My blood turned to ice." Jake tried to cover. "Oh, that's his girlfriend. She's sleeping. You just said he was at work." The stranger's voice had changed. It was colder now. Dangerous. I pressed call on my phone and whispered to the operator. "Someone's in our apartment. Send help. Now." I gave our address as quietly as I could. In the living room, I heard a crash. Jake cried out. I wanted to help him, but I was frozen with fear. The operator told me to stay hidden and keep the line open. More crashing sounds. Jake was fighting back. "Get off me," he screamed. I heard heavy footsteps running toward my room. I backed away from the door, looking for somewhere to hide. The closet was too obvious. Under the bed was stupid. The doorknob started turning. I'd locked it earlier, thank God. The stranger pounded on the door. "I know you're in there." His voice was completely different now. All pretense of being a delivery driver was gone. This was a predator. The pounding got louder. The cheap door was starting to crack. I grabbed the baseball bat Jake kept in my room. We'd joke about it being for protection. This wasn't funny anymore. The door burst open. The man who stood there wasn't wearing any delivery uniform. His clothes were dirty and torn. His eyes were wild, unfocused. He had a knife in his hand. Blood on his shirt. Jake's blood. He smiled when he saw me. There you are. I swung the bat with everything I had. It connected with his shoulder. He grunted and stumbled back. I swung again, aiming for his head. He ducked and lunged at me with the knife. I felt it slice across my arm. Hot pain shot through me, but adrenaline kept me moving. We fought in that small bedroom. Him with his knife, me with my bat. I was younger, faster, but he was desperate and crazy. The bat connected with his ribs. He doubled over, gasping. I heard sirens in the distance. The man heard them too. His eyes went wide. He turned and ran. I chased him to the living room and found Jake. He was on the floor, holding his stomach. Blood seeped between his fingers. "Stay with me, Jake." I pressed my hands over his. The police burst in moments later. Paramedics followed. They worked on Jake while I told the cops what happened. The fake delivery guy had run out the back. They caught him 3 blocks away. Turns out he'd been watching our apartment for weeks. He knew our routines, knew when we ordered food. He'd killed the real delivery driver and taken his car. Jake survived, barely. 3 surgeries and 2 months in the hospital. I needed 15 stitches in my arm, but we were alive. The man, whose name I won't even write, got life in prison. During the trial, we learned he'd done this before. 3 other apartments. Not everyone had been as lucky as us. Jake and I moved out the next month. We don't live together anymore. Too many bad memories. But we're still friends. We just don't order delivery anymore. And I always check who's at the door. The basement office. My first real job out of college was at a marketing firm downtown. I was 23 and desperate for work. The pay wasn't great, but it was experience. The office was in an old building from the 1920s. My desk was in the basement. They said it was temporary until space opened up upstairs. That was fine with me. I needed the job. The basement was bigger than you'd expect. It had been renovated into a modern office space. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The walls were painted that corporate beige color. About 15 of us worked down there, mostly new hires like me. Everyone seemed nice enough at first. My supervisor, Linda, showed me to my desk on my first day. "You'll be here," she said, pointing to a cubicle in the corner. It was the furthest spot from the elevator, right next to an old door marked "Storage." "What's in there?" I asked. Linda's smile faltered for just a second. "Oh, just old files. It's been locked for years. We lost the key," she added quickly. Something about the way she said it felt off. But I didn't want to make waves on my first day. The first week went fine. Normal office stuff. Spreadsheets, meetings, coffee runs. I stayed late most nights, trying to make a good impression. That's when I first heard it. I was alone in the basement, finishing a report. Everyone else had left by 7 p.m. A sound came from behind the storage door, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. I froze at my desk. The sound stopped. I waited, listening. Nothing. I convinced myself it was just pipes or something. Old building, old noises. I finished my work and left quickly. The next time I stayed late, I heard it again. This time it sounded like footsteps. Slow, shuffling footsteps. Right behind that door. I got up from my desk and walked over to it. The door was solid wood, painted the same beige as the walls. The doorknob was old brass, tarnished with age. I tried turning it. Locked, just like Linda said. I pressed my ear against the door. Silence. "Hello," I said quietly. No response. I felt stupid and went back to my desk. But I couldn't concentrate. Every little sound made me jump. I left early that night. Over the next few weeks, I asked my co-workers about the door. Most just shrugged. "It's always been locked," they'd say. But I noticed something. People avoided that corner of the basement. Nobody used the printer near my desk. They'd walk all the way to the other side instead. During lunch one day, I sat with Marcus from IT. He'd been with the company for 5 years. "Marcus," I said casually, "what's really behind that storage door?" He stopped eating, looked around to make sure no one was listening. "You hear things?" he asked quietly. I nodded. He leaned in closer. "There was an incident before I started here." "What kind of incident?" Marcus shook his head. "They don't talk about it, but someone died down there." "In the storage room?" "No," he said. "In the basement. At your desk, actually." My blood ran cold. "The guy who had your job before. Worked late all the time, like you. They found him one morning. Heart attack, they said." "But," I prompted. "But he was only 25. Perfect health. And his face." Marcus trailed off. "What about his face? Looked like he'd seen something. Something terrible." I didn't stay late for the next week, but the work was piling up. My supervisor was asking questions. I had to stay late again. This time, I brought headphones. Loud music to drown out any sounds. It worked for a while. But around 9 p.m., my computer screen flickered. The fluorescent lights dimmed. Then I felt it. Cold air, right on the back of my neck. Like someone breathing on me. I spun around. Nobody there. But the storage door was open. Just a crack. Just enough to see darkness beyond. I knew that door had been locked. I'd checked it an hour ago. My hands shook as I grabbed my things. I wasn't staying to investigate. As I backed toward the elevator, I kept my eyes on that door. It opened wider, inch by inch. Something was pushing it from the inside. I saw fingers curl around the edge. Pale fingers. Too long to be normal. I ran. Hit the elevator button frantically. Behind me, I heard that shuffling sound again. Getting closer. The elevator dinged open. I dove inside and hammered the close button. As the doors shut, I saw it. Just for a second. A face in the darkness of the storage room. Pale and twisted. Eyes that weren't quite right. And it was smiling. I never went back. Called in sick the next day. Sent my resignation by email. They mailed me my last paycheck. I found a new job within a month. A nice office on the 10th floor. Lots of windows. Lots of light. No basement. Sometimes I wonder if anyone else has my old desk now. If they stay late. If they hear the sounds. If that door still opens by itself. But I don't really want to know. Some doors should stay locked. And some jobs aren't worth any amount of money. The camping trip. Every summer, my family went camping at Pine Lake. It was tradition. My parents, my little sister Emma, and me. I was 16 that year. Emma was 12. We'd been going to the same campground since I was 5. I knew every trail, every swimming spot. It felt like home. That year was different from the start. When we pulled up to our usual site, another family was there. "That's weird," Dad said. "I reserved this spot months ago." He went to the office to sort it out. Came back looking confused. "They say we're in Site 47, not 13. "But we always get Site 13, Mom protested. "I know. They said it's closed for maintenance." We drove to Site 47. It was at the very back of the campground, right at the edge of the forest. No other campers nearby. "It's kind of creepy back here," Emma said. I agreed, but didn't want to sound scared. "It's just different," I said. "We'll get used to it." We set up camp as the sun was setting. Dad got the tents up while Mom started dinner. Emma and I gathered firewood. As we walked into the trees, Emma grabbed my hand. "I don't like it here, Jake." "It's fine," I told her. "Same forest as always." But it didn't feel the same. The trees seemed denser here, the shadows deeper. We grabbed wood quickly and hurried back. That night around the campfire, Dad told ghost stories. He always did that. But this time, even he seemed unsettled. His stories were shorter, quieter. We went to bed early. Emma and I shared a tent, our parents in another. I woke up in the middle of the night. Emma was shaking my shoulder. "Jake, wake up. Listen." I heard it immediately. Footsteps circling our tent. Slow, deliberate footsteps. "Dad," I whispered. "Is that you?" The footsteps stopped. We held our breath. Then they started again. Faster this time. "Dad!" I called louder. "What's wrong?" Dad's voice came from their tent. The footsteps were still circling us. "Someone's outside our tent." I heard Dad's tent zipper. His flashlight beam swept the area. "There's no one here," he said, but we could still hear the footsteps, right outside our tent. "I don't hear anything," Dad insisted. Emma was crying now. I unzipped our tent and looked out. Dad was standing there with his flashlight. The footsteps had stopped. "See? Nothing," Dad said. "Probably just a raccoon." But his voice was shaky. We barely slept the rest of the night. The next day, we tried to enjoy ourselves. Went swimming, hiked a little. But none of us went far from camp. As darkness fell, the feeling of being watched returned. During dinner, Emma saw it first. "There's someone in the trees." We all looked where she pointed. A figure stood between the trees, just standing there, watching us. Dad grabbed his flashlight and shined it toward the figure. It stepped back into the darkness. "Hey!" Dad shouted. "This is a private campsite." No response. "I'm calling the rangers," Mom said, but we had no cell service back there. "We'll report it in the morning," Dad decided. "We're leaving tonight," Mom said firmly. "It's probably just another camper who got lost," Dad argued, but even he didn't sound convinced. We stayed. That was our mistake. That night, I woke to Emma screaming. Our tent was open. She was being dragged out by her sleeping bag. I grabbed her arms and pulled. In the darkness, I saw hands gripping her ankles, pale hands with dirty fingernails. "Help!" I screamed. Dad burst from his tent with a camping knife. The hands let go. We heard crashing through the underbrush. Emma was hysterical. Red marks circled her ankles. We packed up in the dark, threw everything in the car. As we drove out, our headlights swept across Site 13, our usual spot. It wasn't closed for maintenance. A tent was there, and standing next to it was the figure from the woods, watching us leave. We called the police from the first gas station. They found evidence of someone living in the woods, makeshift shelters, stolen camping gear, and worse things I won't describe. The man was never caught. The campground closed permanently that fall. We never went camping again. Emma still has nightmares. She's 20 now, in college, but she won't sleep in a tent, won't even go near the woods. I don't blame her. Some memories don't fade. Some fears are justified, and some family traditions need to end. The house sitter. I was 19 and needed money for college. When Mrs. Chen asked me to house sit for 2 weeks, I jumped at the chance. She lived in a beautiful old Victorian house on Maple Street. I'd walked past it 100 times, always admiring it. "It's easy," she said. "Just water the plants and feed Whiskers." Whiskers was her ancient orange cat. He mostly slept all day. "The pay is $500 for 2 weeks," she added. That sealed the deal. Mrs. Chen gave me a tour before she left. The house was even nicer inside. Antique furniture, hardwood floors, a grand staircase. "You can sleep in the guest room," she said, showing me upstairs. "This door," she pointed to one at the end of the hall, "stays locked." "What's in there?" I asked. "My late husband's study. I keep it locked for personal reasons." Her face looked sad, so I didn't push. "The key is in the kitchen drawer if there's an emergency," she added. "But please, only in an emergency." I promised I wouldn't go in there. She left the next morning for her trip to China. The first few days were perfect. I had a whole house to myself. I watched TV on her huge screen, cooked in her gourmet kitchen. Whiskers mostly ignored me. On the 4th night, things changed. I was reading in the living room when I heard a thump upstairs. Just one thump, like something falling. I went up to check. Nothing seemed out of place. Whiskers was asleep on the guest bed. I went back downstairs. An hour later, another thump. This time I was sure it came from the locked room. I stood outside the door, listening. Silence. "Hello," I called out. No answer. I figured it was just the old house settling. The next night, the thumps turned into footsteps. Clear, distinct footsteps pacing back and forth. Inside the locked room. I called Mrs. Chen, but it went straight to voicemail. International travel, I guessed. I texted her about the noises. No response. By the 7th night, I was scared. The footsteps had become constant, and now there was talking. Muffled voices behind that door. Sometimes laughing, sometimes arguing. I couldn't make out the words. I thought about calling the police. But what would I say? There are voices in a locked room. They'd think I was crazy. On the 10th night, I couldn't take it anymore. The voices had become screams. Horrible, pain-filled screams. I ran to the kitchen and found the key. My hands shook as I climbed the stairs. The screaming got louder as I approached. I put the key in the lock, turned it. The screaming stopped instantly. I pushed open the door. The room was empty, completely empty. No furniture, no decorations, just bare walls and a wooden floor. And it was cold, so cold I could see my breath. In the center of the floor was a dark stain. It looked old. It looked like blood. I backed out of the room and slammed the door. Ran downstairs. I was packing my things when I heard footsteps above me. Not in the locked room. In the hallway. Coming toward the stairs. I grabbed my bag and ran for the front door. It wouldn't open. The deadbolt was locked, and my key wouldn't turn. The footsteps started down the stairs. Slow, heavy steps. I ran to the back door. Also locked. The windows wouldn't budge. I was trapped. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. I pressed myself against the wall, terrified, but I saw nothing. Just empty air. Then I felt hands around my throat. Cold, invisible hands. Squeezing. I fought against nothing. Clawed at the air. My vision started going black. Then whiskers appeared. The old cat hissed and swiped at the air near my face. The pressure on my throat vanished. I gasped for air. The front door swung open. I didn't question it. I ran. I spent the rest of the night in my car. The next morning, I went back with my father, just to get my things. The house was normal again. Warm. Inviting. Like nothing had happened. Mrs. Chen came back 3 days later. I met her to return the keys. "Did you go in the room?" she asked immediately. I nodded, ashamed. She sighed deeply. "My husband died in that room 20 years ago. It wasn't natural causes. I found him with another woman. There was a fight. He killed her, then himself. I keep it locked because sometimes they're still there, still fighting, still dying, over and over." She paid me the full $500. I tried to refuse, but she insisted. "You survived," she said. "Not everyone does." "What do you mean?" "You're the fourth house sitter I've hired. The others, they were found in that room. They had unlocked it too, but they didn't have whiskers to protect them." I looked at the old cat in her arms. He stared back with knowing eyes. I took the money and left. Never walked down Maple Street again. Some houses aren't meant to be lived in. Some doors aren't meant to be opened. And some cats are more than they seem. The night shift. I worked the night shift at a gas station on Highway 50. It was a lonely job, but it paid well. From 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., I was the only employee there. Just me, the fluorescent lights, and the occasional customer. The station was in the middle of nowhere, 20 miles to the nearest town in either direction, surrounded by empty fields and scattered woods. Most nights were quiet. A few truckers, maybe some travelers. I'd read books, clean, stock shelves. Easy money. I'd been working there about 3 months when it happened. It was a Tuesday night in October. Dead quiet. No customers for hours. Around 2 a.m., a car pulled up to pump 3. An old sedan. Looked like it was from the 80s. Rust covered most of the blue paint. I watched on the security monitor as someone got out. They were wearing a long coat and a hat. Couldn't see their face. They stood at the pump but didn't pump any gas. Just stood there. After 5 minutes, I got on the intercom. "Can I help you?" They didn't respond. Didn't even move. I watched for another few minutes. Finally, I decided to go out there. I grabbed the baseball bat we kept behind the counter, just in case. When I stepped outside, the figure turned toward me. The coat was old and stained. The hat shadowed their face completely. "Everything okay?" I asked, staying near the door. They tilted their head, like a dog hearing a strange sound. Then they spoke. The voice was wrong, too low, too raspy, like they hadn't spoken in years. "Where is she? Where's who?" I asked. "The girl, the night girl. I'm the only one working tonight." They took a step toward me. I gripped the bat tighter. "She was here. Before. I don't know who you mean. You need gas or not." They stood there for a long moment, then turned and got back in their car, drove away without buying anything. I went back inside and locked the door, checked all the cameras. Everything seemed normal again, but I kept the bat close. An hour later, the phone rang. We rarely got calls at night. I answered with the standard greeting. Silence on the other end. Then that same raspy voice. "Found her." The line went dead. I was officially freaked out. Called my manager, but he didn't answer. It was 3 a.m. after all. I thought about leaving, but I needed this job. Around 4 a.m., I was stocking cigarettes when I saw movement outside. That same car was parked across the highway, just sitting there in the darkness. I could barely make out someone in the driver's seat, watching the station, watching me. I called the police, told them about the weird customer and the car. They said they'd send someone when they could. We were pretty low priority out here. 30 minutes passed. The car hadn't moved. Then I heard the back door rattle. The emergency exit. Someone was trying to get in. I ran to check, bat in hand. The door was still locked, but the handle was turning, back and forth, like they were testing it. I backed away and returned to the front. The car across the highway was gone. My heart was racing. Where did they go? I checked all the cameras. Nothing at the back door. Nothing at the pumps. But there was a blind spot. The side of the building where we kept the dumpster. I heard a scraping sound from that direction. Metal on concrete. Were they moving the dumpster? There was a window on that side. Small, but big enough for someone to squeeze through. I ran to check it was locked. As I got close, a face appeared in the glass. That same hat. But now I could see underneath it. The face was wrong. Too pale. Eyes too wide. Smile too big. They pressed against the glass. Fog spread from their breath. They wrote something in the fog with their finger. Found her. I stumbled backward, knocked over a display of chips. When I looked again, they were gone. I called 911 again, begged them to hurry, said someone was trying to break in. They promised a unit was on the way. I huddled behind the counter, bat ready, watching all the cameras. Then the lights went out. Complete darkness. The emergency generator should have kicked in. It didn't. I held my breath, listening. Footsteps. Inside the store. How did they get in? The footsteps were slow, deliberate, coming down the candy aisle. I crawled toward the front door. My keys were in my pocket. If I could just get outside, get to my car. The footsteps stopped. There you are. The voice was right behind me. I swung the bat blindly in the dark. Hit nothing but air. A hand grabbed my wrist. Impossibly strong. Impossibly cold. You're not her. Where is the night girl? I don't know. I screamed. The grip tightened. I heard bones creaking. Then sirens. Police sirens getting closer. The grip released. Footsteps running. The back door slammed. The lights flickered back on. I was alone. My wrist was purple with bruises. The police found no one. No sign of forced entry. The security footage showed nothing. Just me, swinging a bat at empty air, talking to no one. They thought I was crazy. My manager thought I was on drugs. But I knew what happened. I quit that night. Never even went back for my last paycheck. Later, I did some research. Found old news articles. A girl named Sarah had worked night shifts at that station. 5 years before me. She disappeared one night. Never found. Her car was still in the parking lot. Door open. Keys in the ignition. But Sarah was gone. They say she was taken. But nobody knows by who. Or what. I think about that raspy voice sometimes. Found her. What did they mean? Where did they find her? And why did they come back to where she vanished? I work day shifts now. At a store in the city. Lots of people around. Lots of lights. I never work alone. And I never, ever work nights. Some questions don't need answers. Some mysteries should stay unsolved. And some jobs just aren't worth dying for. The school overnight. Senior year of high school was supposed to be fun. Our class decided to do something special. An overnight lock-in at the school. Just the seniors, from 8 p.m. Friday to 8 a.m. Saturday. Games, movies, junk food. The principal approved it. Even gave us keys to the gym and cafeteria. What could go wrong? There were about 60 of us who showed up. The chaperones were 2 young teachers, Mr. Davis and Ms. Rodriguez. They were cool, pretty much let us do whatever. The night started great. Basketball in the gym, pizza in the cafeteria. Some kids brought gaming systems for the classrooms. Around midnight, a group of us decided to explore. The school was creepy in the dark. Long hallways with just emergency lighting. Our voices echoed weird. There were 5 of us. Me, my best friend Tyler, Amanda, Jessica, and Carlos. We had flashlights from our phones. Let's check out the basement, Tyler suggested. There's no basement, Amanda said. Yeah, there is, Carlos insisted. My brother told me. The janitor's area. They keep it locked. We'd all heard rumors about it. Storage rooms, old equipment, maintenance tunnels. But students weren't allowed down there. I know where the door is, Jessica said. She led us to a hallway behind the auditorium. Sure enough, there was a door marked Authorized Personnel Only. Tyler tried the handle. Locked. Forget it, I said. Let's go back. But Carlos was picking the lock with a paperclip. He was good at that stuff. The lock clicked open. We shouldn't, Amanda whispered. But Tyler was already opening the door. Stairs led down into darkness. Our phone lights barely penetrated it. 5 minutes, Tyler said, just to look around. We descended the stairs. The air got colder with each step. At the bottom was a narrow hallway. Pipes ran along the ceiling. The walls were unpainted concrete. This is creepy as hell, Jessica said. We found storage rooms full of old desks, boxes of ancient textbooks, broken projectors and TVs from the 90s. Look at this, Carlos called out. He'd found another door. This one was different, newer, with a keypad lock. Why would they need a keypad lock down here? Amanda asked. Good question. Tyler was already trying random numbers. Stop, I said. We should go. That's when we heard it. Footsteps above us. Heavy, running footsteps. Then screaming. Not playful screaming. Terror. We ran for the stairs. But the door at the top wouldn't open. It had locked behind us. Our phones. Jessica said. Call someone. No signal in the basement. The screaming above got louder, then suddenly stopped. Complete silence. What's happening up there? Amanda whispered. We pounded on the door, yelled for help. Nothing. The other door, Carlos said. Maybe it leads to another exit. We went back to the keypad door. Tyler starting trying combinations frantically. Try the school's founding year, Jessica suggested. 1987. The keypad beeped. The lock clicked open. We pushed through the door and stopped dead. It wasn't a storage room. It was set up like a classroom, but wrong. Desks were arranged in a circle. Strange symbols were painted on the walls, and in the center, what is that? Amanda gasped. It looked like an altar, made of black stone, with grooves carved into the top, dark stains in the grooves. We need to leave. Now, I said. But behind us, the door slammed shut. The keypad sparked and went dark. We were trapped. That's when we noticed the smell. Rotten, like old meat. It was coming from a corner of the room. Tyler shined his light there. A pile of something. We stepped closer. Clothes. Old clothes. A Letterman jacket from 1995. A cheerleader uniform from 2001. A band shirt from 2010. All with dark stains. All torn. Oh God, Jessica whimpered. She'd found something else. A yearbook on one of the desks, opened to a memorial page. In memory of Marcus Webb, 1995. Disappeared October 13th. I checked my phone for the date. October 13th. There's more. Jessica turned pages. Memorial after memorial. All students who vanished. All on October 13th. Different years. Every few years, Carlos said, someone disappears. On this date, a sound made us all freeze. Chanting. Coming from above us. But not from where we'd come from. From directly overhead. Through the ceiling, we could hear it. Multiple voices. Rhythmic. In a language I didn't recognize. The chanting grew louder. Dust fell from the ceiling. They're right above us, Tyler whispered. The altar in the center of the room began to vibrate. Actually vibrate, like something was waking up. The door. Amanda pulled at it desperately. It wouldn't budge. The chanting reached a crescendo, then stopped. Dead silence. We held our breath. A new sound. Footsteps. Coming down stairs we couldn't see. There had to be another entrance to this room. Hide, I hissed. We scrambled behind overturned desks. A section of the wall swung inward. A hidden door. Figures in black robes entered. Their faces were covered by hoods. They moved to surround the altar. One of them spoke. The offering must be made. The pattern must continue. The school demands its price. I recognized the voice. Mr. Davis, our chaperone. Another figure spoke. Ms. Rodriguez. The students are prepared above. We have selected the sacrifice. Bring them. Two robed figures left through the hidden door. The others began chanting again. Carlos shifted behind his desk. His foot knocked over a book. The chanting stopped. "Someone's here," a voice said. The robed figures spread out. "Searching." We pressed ourselves lower. A hand grabbed Jessica's hair. She screamed. We all jumped up to help her. The figures surrounded us quickly. "More offerings," one said. "The hunger will be well fed." They grabbed us. We fought, but there were too many. They dragged us toward the altar. That's when the main door exploded inward. Police officers rushed in, flashlight beams, and shouted commands. The robed figures tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. As they were handcuffed, their hoods fell away. Teachers, all teachers. Some I'd had for years, some I'd trusted. The police led us out a different way, up through the hidden stairs. We emerged in the principal's office. The real principal was there, along with our parents and half the police force. Turns out Carlos had managed to send one text, just before we lost signal completely. It only said, "Help basement." But it was enough. His mom called the police. They'd been searching for an hour. The other students were safe. They'd been locked in the gym by the teachers, told it was a safety drill. The investigation revealed everything. The secret society had existed for decades. Teachers and staff members, performing rituals, making sacrifices. They believed it gave the school power, success, funding. Every few years, they took a student, always on October 13th. Always someone who wouldn't be missed much. A loner, a runaway, someone they could explain away. But they'd gotten greedy, decided to take more this time, during the senior lock-in. Make it look like a tragic accident, gas leak or something. They'd almost succeeded. The school closed permanently. Too much horror in those walls. Too many secrets. Too much blood. They tore it down the next year. Built a shopping center. But people say on October 13th, if you drive by late at night, you can still hear chanting. Still see lights in windows that aren't there. Still feel the hunger of whatever they were feeding. I graduated from a different school. So did most of us. We don't talk about that night much, but we all check on each other every October 13th, just to make sure we're all still here, still alive, still free. Some of the teachers got life sentences, others made plea deals. They all said the same thing, that the school made them do it, that something old lived beneath it, something hungry, something that demanded payment. I don't know if I believe that, but I know what I saw, what I felt in that room, and I know I'll never forget. Some traditions are better left buried. Some secrets should stay hidden, and some schools shouldn't have basements. The real principal was there, along with our parents and half the police force. Turns out Carlos had managed to send one text, just before we lost signal completely. It only said, "Help basement." But it was enough. His mom called the police. They'd been searching for an hour. The other students were safe. They'd been locked in the gym by the teachers, told it was a safety drill. The investigation revealed everything. The secret society had existed for decades. Teachers and staff members, performing rituals, making sacrifices. They believed it gave the school power, Success. Funding. Every few years, they took a student. Always on October 13th. Always someone who wouldn't be missed much. A loner. A runaway. Someone they could explain away. But they'd gotten greedy. Decided to take more this time. During the senior lock-in. Make it look like a tragic accident. Gas leak or something. They'd almost succeeded. The school closed permanently. Too much horror in those walls. Too many secrets. Too much blood. They tore it down the next year. Built a shopping center. But people say on October 13th, if you drive by late at night, you can still hear chanting. Still see lights in windows that aren't there. Still feel the hunger of whatever they were feeding. I graduated from a different school. So did most of us. We don't talk about that night much. But we all check on each other every October 13th. Just to make sure we're all still here. Still alive. Still free. Some of the teachers got life sentences. Others made plea deals. They all said the same thing. That the school made them do it. That something old lived beneath it. Something hungry. Something that demanded payment. I don't know if I believe that. But I know what I saw. What I felt in that room. And I know I'll never forget. Some traditions are better left buried. Some secrets should stay hidden. And some schools shouldn't have basements. The ride share. I was 24 and broke in the city. My car had died, and I couldn't afford to fix it. So I used ride shares for everything. Work, groceries, going out. It was expensive, but what choice did I have? One Friday night, I was leaving a friend's party. It was late, around 2 a.m. The surge pricing was insane. $60 for a 15-minute ride home. Then I saw a notification for a new app. Ride Now. Half the price of the competition. I downloaded it immediately. The interface was basic but functional. I requested a ride. 3 minutes away. Price $15. Perfect. A black sedan pulled up exactly on time. The driver was a middle-aged man. Thin, pale, wearing a baseball cap. "Sarah?" he asked. I nodded and got in the back. The car smelled weird. Like air freshener trying to cover something else. "Heading home?" he asked. "Yeah, long night." He nodded and started driving, but I noticed he wasn't following the GPS. "Hey, you missed the turn," I said. "Shortcut," he replied. "Save you some time." I watched the route on my phone. We were definitely going the wrong way. "This isn't the way to my apartment. Trust me," he said. "I know these streets." His voice was flat, emotionless. I gripped my phone tighter. "Actually, can you just follow the GPS? I'm in a hurry." He glanced at me in the rearview mirror. His eyes were strange, glassy, unfocused. "Almost there," he said. But we weren't. We were heading toward the industrial district. Empty warehouses and closed factories. "Stop the car," I said firmly. "I want to get out." He didn't respond, didn't slow down. I tried the door handle. It wouldn't open. Child locks. "Let me out," I shouted. He pressed harder on the gas. I called 911 on my phone. 911, what's your emergency? I'm in a rideshare and the driver won't let me out. He's taking me somewhere else. I gave them my location. The driver heard me. He yanked the wheel hard right. My phone flew from my hand. We screeched into an empty parking lot. An abandoned building loomed ahead. He slammed on the brakes. I scrambled for my phone. Found it on the floor. The call had disconnected. The driver turned to face me. Up close, I could see his face better. Hollow cheeks, dark circles under his eyes, and his smile. It was too wide, too empty. "We're here," he said. "Where?" I demanded. "This isn't my address. Your new home." He got out of the car. I frantically tried calling 911 again. He walked around to my door. I locked it from the inside. He produced a key and unlocked it anyway. The door swung open. "Get out," he said calmly. "No." He reached for me. I kicked him hard in the stomach. He doubled over, gasping. I scrambled across to the other door, kicked it open, ran. The parking lot was huge and empty, nowhere to hide. I could hear him behind me, not running, walking, steady, patient footsteps. "You can't run forever," he called out. I reached the street, looked both ways. No cars, no people, no help. But there was a 24-hour gas station, 3 blocks away. I could see the lights. I ran harder than I'd ever run. My lungs burned. My legs screamed. Behind me, the footsteps continued, never speeding up, never slowing down, just steady, relentless. I burst into the gas station. The clerk jumped. "Call the police." I gasped. "Someone's chasing me." The clerk grabbed the phone. I turned to watch the door. The driver stood outside, just beyond the lights, watching, waiting. "They're on the way," the clerk said. 5 minutes. The longest 5 minutes of my life. The driver never moved, never stopped staring, never stopped smiling. When the police arrived, he was gone, vanished. His car was gone too. They took my statement, checked traffic cameras. Nothing. The car didn't exist in any database. The license plate I remembered was fake. The Ride Now app had disappeared from my phone. No record of it in the App Store. No record of my ride. Like it never existed. The police thought I was drunk or having a mental breakdown. But I knew what happened. I knew it was real. I took the bus home that night. Moved apartments the next week. Bought a car I couldn't afford. I never used ride shares again. Sometimes, late at night, I check the App Store, looking for Ride Now. It's never there. But once in a while, I get a notification. Your driver is 3 minutes away. I delete it immediately. Change my phone number. But it always finds me again. That smiling face in the driver photo. Those empty eyes. That patient, steady pursuit. He's still out there, driving, hunting, waiting for someone to download the app. Someone desperate to save money. Someone alone late at night. Someone like I was. I don't know what would have happened in that building. Don't know what he wanted. But I know I was lucky. Lucky to escape. Lucky to survive. Not everyone is. When people go missing in the city, when they vanish without a trace, I wonder if they got a notification too. Your driver is 3 minutes away. I wonder if they got in. And I wonder where he took them. To what new home? Some apps shouldn't be downloaded. Some rides shouldn't be cheap. And some drivers aren't human. The inheritance. When my great-aunt Mildred died, I barely remembered her. I'd met her maybe twice as a kid. She was the family's weird relative. Lived alone in the mountains. Never married. No kids. People said she was touched. So when the lawyer called about her will, I was shocked. She'd left me her house. Just me. Not my parents or my siblings. Me. A 25-year-old barely making rent. There are conditions, the lawyer said. You must live in the house for 1 full year. If you leave before that, you forfeit everything. Everything? I asked. The house and its contents, valued at approximately 2.3 million. I nearly dropped the phone. My parents were suspicious. Why you? Mom kept asking. You barely knew her. I didn't have an answer, but I wasn't turning down a free house, even if it meant living in the middle of nowhere for a year. I drove up on a cold November day. The house was 3 hours from civilization, up a winding mountain road. No neighbors for miles. It was bigger than I expected. Victorian style, 3 stories. Needed work, but structurally sound. The lawyer met me there with the keys. Your aunt's belongings are still inside, he said. Per her wishes, nothing has been touched. You'll find her instructions on the kitchen table. Instructions? He shrugged. She was very specific about certain things. He left quickly, like he couldn't wait to get away. I entered the house alone. It smelled like old wood and lavender. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light. Everything was frozen in time. Teacup still on the side table. Book open on the chair, like she'd just stepped out. I found the instructions in the kitchen, written in shaky handwriting. Welcome, dear one. If you're reading this, I'm gone. And you're here. Good. The house is yours, but you must follow the rules. For your own safety. 1. Keep all mirrors covered after dark. 2. Never go in the attic during a full moon. 3. The basement door must remain locked. 4. If you hear knocking, do not answer. 5. Feed the cats. That's all. 1 year. Then freedom. Aunt Mildred. Feed the cats. I hadn't seen any cats. The rules seemed like nonsense. Old woman superstitions. But I'd humor them for 2.3 million. I spent the first week cleaning and settling in. The house was fully furnished. Antiques everywhere. First editions in the library. Paintings that looked expensive. No wonder it was worth so much. I found the cats on the 8th day. Or rather, they found me. I woke to glowing eyes staring at me. 7 cats, sitting on my bedroom floor, watching me. They weren't normal cats. Too big, too still, too intelligent. One of them, a massive black Tom, meowed once. They all filed out. I followed them to the kitchen. They sat by empty bowls I hadn't noticed before. In the pantry, I found bags of cat food. Special stuff. The label was in a language I didn't recognize. I filled their bowls. They ate in perfect synchronization, then disappeared. I didn't see them again for days. The first full moon came 2 weeks later. I remembered the rule about the attic. Stayed downstairs, watching TV. Around midnight, I heard footsteps above me. Slow, deliberate footsteps, pacing back and forth. It went on for hours. I didn't investigate. The next morning, I found the attic door. It had been hidden behind a tapestry. There were scratches on the inside of the door, deep gouges in the wood, like something had tried to claw its way out. I left the tapestry in place. The knocking started in the third week, always at 3 a.m. 3 knocks on the front door. Pause. 3 more. I'd lie in bed, remembering the rules. Do not answer. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I crept to a window and peeked out. A woman stood on the porch, in a wedding dress, old-fashioned, yellowed with age. She knocked again. Her hand, it went through the door, like she wasn't solid. She looked up at the window. Her face was Aunt Mildred's, but young, but wrong. Her eyes were black holes, her smile too wide. She waved at me. I stumbled back from the window. The knocking continued until dawn. I started keeping all the mirrors covered after that, even during the day, because sometimes I'd catch glimpses, movement that wasn't mine, faces that weren't there, shapes forming in the reflection. The cats became my only comfort. They'd appear when things got bad, form a circle around me, purring in unison. The strange things would retreat. One night, I made a mistake. I'd been drinking, forgot about the basement door, tried the handle. It was locked, like the instructions said, but I heard something respond to my touch. A shifting, a stirring, like something massive uncoiling. The whole house shook. Pictures fell off walls. The cats appeared instantly, hissing at the basement door. The black Tom looked at me with 2 human eyes, shook his head slowly. I backed away. The shifting sound continued for hours. I researched the house's history, found old newspaper articles. Mildred had inherited it from her aunt, who'd inherited it from her aunt. Always a woman, always unmarried, always considered touched, going back 200 years. And others, stories of disappearances, people who'd visited the house and never left. A man in 1953, a family in 1978, 2 hikers in 1995, all last seen near the property. I found Mildred's journals in the library. Recent entries were lucid. The house needs a keeper, someone strong enough to hold the doors, smart enough to follow the rules. I've watched the family. Sarah is the one. She has the blood. She has the will. She'll understand in time. Older entries were stranger. They whisper through the mirrors, promise me freedom. But I know better. The cats know better. We keep the vigil. We hold the line. And older still, fed the thing in the basement. It's growing stronger. May need a larger offering soon. The cats are worried. They remember what happened before, when Great-Aunt Martha let it out. The town still doesn't know, thinks it was a mine collapse. We know better. 6 months in, I understood. The house wasn't just a house. It was a prison. The rules weren't superstitions. They were survival. Whatever was in the basement, whatever walked the attic during full moons, whatever knocked at 3 a.m., they were contained, barely, by the rules, by the cats, by the keeper, me. I stopped thinking about leaving, started thinking about after. Who would I choose? Which young relative showed promise? Who could handle the truth? The cats approved. They stayed visible more often, taught me things, where to find the special food, how to reinforce the barriers, when to perform the rituals. Yes, there were rituals, old words that hurt to speak, symbols that burned to draw, but they worked, kept the things contained. Mostly. Sometimes something would slip through. A shadow in the corner, a voice in the walls, a hand reaching from under the bed. The cats and I would deal with it, push it back, seal the cracks. The year passed faster than expected. On the final day, the lawyer returned. "Congratulations," he said. "The house is yours. You're free to leave now." I looked at him, at the cats arranged behind me, at the house that had become my home, my responsibility. "I'm not leaving," I said. He smiled knowingly. "They never do. The ones who last the year. Welcome to the family business, Miss Sarah." He left me the real papers, not about money or property, about duty, about the things we keep locked away, about why they must never escape. I'm writing this 10 years later, still in the house, still keeping the rules, still feeding the cats. I've made improvements, stronger locks, better barriers, more cats. I've chosen my successor, a young cousin named Emily. Smart girl, strong will. She'll do well here, when the time comes, because someone has to keep watch. Someone has to hold the doors. Someone has to feed the cats. The world depends on it, even if the world never knows. Some inheritances are more than money. Some houses are more than homes. And some cats are more than pets. Much more. The final story. The mirror shop. This happened just last month. I'm still processing it. Still trying to understand. I own an antique shop on Mason Street. Been running it for 5 years. I specialize in old furniture, paintings, the usual. But I avoid mirrors. Always have. Something about old mirrors creeps me out. Too many horror movies, I guess. But when Mrs. Peterson's estate sale came up, I couldn't resist. She'd been a collector for 90 years. The whole town knew about her treasures. I bought 3 truckloads without looking closely. Figured I'd sort it all at the shop. Among the items were 12 mirrors, all different sizes and styles. Hand mirrors, wall mirrors, a full-length standing mirror. I almost sent them to another dealer, but they were beautiful and valuable, so I cleaned them up and put them in the back room. I'd deal with them later. The first weird thing happened that night. I was doing inventory when I heard humming, a woman's voice, soft and melodic, coming from the back room. I checked everywhere. No one there. Must have been from the street. The next day, a customer asked about mirrors. Reluctantly, I showed her the collection. She gasped when she saw them. "These are incredible. How much for the hand mirror?" It was silver, ornate, probably 1890s. 200, I said. She paid immediately. That night, she called the shop. "The mirror you sold me. Did you notice anything strange?" "Strange how?" "When I look in it, my reflection. It's delayed. Delayed. Like it takes a second to catch up with me." I told her old mirrors could have imperfections. Offered a refund. She declined and hung up. But she called again the next night. "It's getting worse. The delay is longer. My reflection. It started doing things I'm not doing. Bring it back, I said. I'll give you a full refund. I tried. I can't find it. What do you mean? I put it in a drawer. Locked it. The mirror's gone. But I can still hear the humming. She sounded terrified. I drove to her house. When I arrived, the front door was open. Mrs. Chen. I called out. No answer. I found her in the bedroom, standing perfectly still, staring at the wall. Mrs. Chen. She turned slowly. Her movements were wrong, jerky, like a marionette. Hello, she said, but her voice was different, older, and she was humming that same tune. I backed away. Her hand reached out. In it was the silver mirror. I saw my reflection. But it wasn't me. It was someone else. An old woman with my face, smiling. I ran, called the police from my car. They found Mrs. Chen unconscious. No memory of the past 2 days. The mirror was gone. I went back to my shop and checked the other mirrors. Really looked at them this time. In each one, the reflection was wrong. Not obviously, just off. A shadow where there shouldn't be one. A face in the background. Movement in the corner. I researched Mrs. Peterson. Found out she'd been buying mirrors for decades. Specific mirrors. From estate sales, auctions, private collections. Always mirrors with a history. Mirrors from houses where people had disappeared. Mirrors found at crime scenes. Mirrors with dark stories. She'd been collecting them, keeping them locked away, until she died, and I'd let them loose. The next day, 2 more customers came in, asked specifically about mirrors. Something was drawing them. I lied, said I didn't have any, but they kept coming. Different people, same request. We heard you have special mirrors. Mirrors that show things. Mirrors that remember. I moved all the mirrors to the basement, covered them with sheets, locked the door. But at night, I could hear them, humming, whispering, and sometimes crying. I tried to break one, hit it with a hammer. The glass cracked, but in the cracks I saw eyes, dozens of eyes, looking out. The mirror repaired itself overnight. I called an expert in the occult. She came, took one look, and left. Burn the building down, she said. It's the only way. But I couldn't. Too much invested. Too much to lose. So I tried something else. I hung the mirrors in the shop. All of them. Created a mirror maze in the back room. And I waited. They came that night. The collectors. People who knew what the mirrors really were. How much for the full set? A man asked. He wore an expensive suit. Had cold, dead eyes. They're not for sale. Everything's for sale, he said. Name a price. Why do you want them? He smiled. Same reason Mrs. Peterson did. To keep them safe. Or to use them. Does it matter? It did. Because I'd finally understood. The mirrors weren't just mirrors. They were doors. And things were trying to come through. Things that had been trapped. Things that wanted out. $1 million, I said. For all 12. He didn't hesitate. Wrote a check on the spot. Pleasure doing business, he said. They loaded the mirrors that night. Carefully. Reverently. Like they were handling bombs. Maybe they were. I watched them drive away. Felt relief. Then dread. What had I unleashed? Where were they taking them? What would they do with them? I still don't know. But sometimes I check the news. Look for strange disappearances, unexplained events. And I wonder, are the mirrors being used? Are the doors being opened? Are the things coming through? I sold the shop last week, moving to another state, starting fresh. No more antiques. Definitely no more mirrors. But sometimes, in reflections, in windows, in water, in glass, I see movement that isn't there. Faces that aren't mine. Shadows reaching out. And I know they remember me. The one who let them loose. The one who sold them. The one who didn't burn it all down. I should have listened. Should have destroyed them. Now they're out there. 12 doors to 12 different hells. In the hands of someone who knows how to open them. God help us all. Because mirrors remember everything. Every face. Every soul. Every secret. And some secrets should stay trapped. Forever. But it's too late now. Too late for regrets. Too late for warnings. The mirrors are loose. The doors are opening. And something's coming through. Something that's been waiting. Something that's been watching. Something that knows your face. Because you've looked in a mirror today. Haven't you? We all have. And they remember. They always remember. Sweet dreams.